What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Good to see you, gang. Tuesday show. Big slate tonight. Lot of interesting angles. We're just going to kind of dive right in. Got everything up on the screen already. We're starting up here in the little window instead of with my big mug up on the screen. Say hi to everybody real quick. We've got Cujo here as usual. Good to see you, buddy. First one in the door. Tizzle Yo, yo, yo. Clintwood's here. Clintwood had a good day yesterday, it looked like. He had the hit a couple days ago, over the weekend, I guess, and then that he told us about yesterday. And then it looked like, what was that, Prize Picks that you put in the Discord last night? A little solid winner on, six picker. $5 six picks. Hit them all, $125, not bad. What do we have in here? So yeah, I said we were going to get started right away and then just dive right into something else. But this was a nice result to say. I love these popping up. Don't play a lot on Prize Picks. Not sure. Are we allowed to play Prize Picks in Jersey yet? For the longest time when I was over at Osimo, I was having to talk about and make picks for these sites like Prize Picks and whatever the other one was, and couldn't play on them at all. So it was just like, yeah, sounds good to me. But looking at these, we had, let's see, Jose Ramirez, more than 8 fantasy points. I think these work on the FanDuel scale, right? Love that one. Corey Seager, more than 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs. Shohei Ohtani, more than 1.5 total bases. Jose Altuve above a 7 fantasy score. Patrick Corbin, more than 4.5 strikeouts. That's a ballsy one. And then Teoscar Hernandez, better than a 6.5 fantasy score. Good picks. I like it. That Corbin one was, don't know that I would have gotten to that one. But the one thing he is sometimes good for is Ks. I'll give him that much. But yeah, interesting looking slate today. So congrats on that, Clintwood. And let me say, we'll finish the rest of the hellos before I get into the interesting slate today. Yada, yada, yada. Anthony Taylor's here. What's going on, buddy? Hit the like. I appreciate that, Anthony. Yeah, hit the like button like Anthony says as you come in the door and get us started here. Been picking up a lot of good views lately. Love that. Solid view total, solid ratio of likes. We could do better, though, If you're out there, hit the like button. It does actually help somewhere behind the scenes to get this in front of more eyeballs, and that's important. Subscribe so that you get notifications of the times we go live. Check out our pals over at acemind.io for all your sim and optimization needs. Promo code rotoscouts, all in caps. 20% off your first month. We'll talk more about them later on. Dimitri's here. Tizzlemane's here. Lone Wolf is here. Colin Sutherland says it's definitely banned in New York. No pick 6 either. No Prize Picks in Jersey, says Lara. All right. Yeah, I thought so. Love to have that. So I do like that that ability to just like make those picks and have the not a crazy like parlay wager, but have that same kind of a format basically. But anyway, let's get into this thing. We've got an interesting Vegas board. We've got the Coors Field game at an 11.5 is separated from the game at Wrigley that has a 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing in toward home plate by 5.5 runs. It's basically a full, really good team worth of runs, or like a half a game. And then some of these, it's close to a full game on some of these. So monster difference between some of these spots. That Wrigley spot obviously looks great in terms of the ability to find some pitching there, and really limiting for the hitters, and completely the other way around obviously at Coors Field with the monster total. Mets at 6.32 implied runs, leading the entire slate. We do have some weather to talk about. Oh, perfect timing. Tizzlemane just pointed out the postponement for the New York game, so we'll just skip over that one. That was the one that I was going to say was the most concerning. Right now, it still looks nice. It's like sunny and 90s, but apparently some big storms in our future here in the New York area. So we'll leave that one off the board. That does knock out our number 2 or number 3 ranked stack with the Yankees. Definitely a big loss there. They were going up against Davis Daniel. Looked like a pretty good spot for them, and we lose one of the more highly projected pitchers in Luis Gil. So big knockdown there, but at least we don't have the weather concern. That was the really ugly spot. We have the other notes were the ridiculous wind blowing in at Wrigley, and then there is wind blowing out to center field at Colorado. Not crazy, 10 miles an hour per Roth. He says there's the potential, just with some storms in the area, like Denver gets this time of year. Storms in the area, wouldn't rule out a late start, is the way he put it, but doesn't seem problematic. He's got a green-yellow. So looking at the number 2 game up on the board then to start us off, we've got Chris Bassett going for the Blue Jays against Grayson Rodriguez. Couple of talented middle-of-the-board type pitchers. Rodriguez obviously has a long way to go to fulfill his destiny as a premium ace caliber talent. Right now, just solidly like a mid-range quality pitcher. Good option, but low strikeout Blue Jays opponent. And then going the other way, Bassett, definitely capable of eating innings, but definitely capable of coughing up some runs and facing one of the best lineups in baseball. 4.64 implied total for the Orioles, and just a 3.95 for the Blue Jays. Maybe does feed the upside to consider some Rodriguez. We'll take a look at where he fits in on the board. I'm just a little bit concerned about the strikeout potential, but he struck out 8 in 4 of his last 6 games. 7 in one of the other ones, and then only 2 against the Padres. That's a somewhat comparable opponent, though. Brewers against the Braves, a 9-run total for that game. It's Bryce Elder, it's Colin Ray, a couple of pretty targetable pitchers with a couple of pretty good lineups. The Brewers coming down more in the middle of the board at 4.34 implied runs. The Braves looking like one of the more appealing teams, especially now that we've lost the Yankees. They're showing a bunch of power against Colin Ray, who is a pitcher that we can target. We do know that Colin Ray can succeed, and we'll talk about what his strikeout potential looks like. But I'm more leaning towards the Braves bats, and it looks like Vegas is a buyer on that spot. So I kind of like that, and I definitely think they're going to gain ground popularity-wise just with the loss of the Yanks. Sonny Gray going for the Cards, having a pretty tremendous season overall. Went 7 in his last one, struck out 9, gave up 2 earned runs. That was coming off a pair of back-to-back 5-run starts and 3 out of 4 starts, giving up exactly 5 earned runs going into that stretch. Still good for strikeouts over that time, but it was nice to see him wrangle the runs a little bit more, make it through 7 innings. That was against the Cubs at Wrigley. Now he gets a very soft landing against the Rays. One of the top projected, if not the top projected pitcher on the slate. 4.13 on the other side for the Cardinals. They're going up against Jeffrey Springs, just making his second start back. Went 3 2/3 in the first one. Got stretched out to 5 in rehab starts down in the minors, but typically doesn't give you much more than that. So I cut it at like 4.5 innings. I think that's reasonable growth, just like the default projection that the model will give if they don't have a full back end projected, which Springs does not. Talented enough guy, but not really seeing the ceiling. I think we're dealing with one of those spots where it's just like, it might get us the median, but probably not getting us to the ceiling. We'll take a look where he fits in price-wise and everything, though. Tyler Mahle making his first start back, going for the Rangers, facing the Astros. Tough opponent in the first start back. Only threw 74 pitches, 4 2/3 innings in his most recent rehab outing. He did make like 6 rehab starts on the way up, but really hadn't gotten stretched out until that most recent one. I'm expecting 80-85, somewhere around there. Houston, not an ideal opponent. Mahle is a talented pitcher, but he's also a pitcher that's somewhat gettable in the mid-range, kind of like a Bassett, somewhere in that level of talent where 4 or 5 runs wouldn't surprise me at all against Houston, but isn't necessarily going to get completely obliterated, and sometimes capable of, even against a team like this, going out and having a very nice start. It's Framber Valdez on the mound for the Astros going up against the Rangers. Definitely keeping the Rangers somewhat in check, but a 4.23 implied total puts them at least on the board for consideration. I never liked targeting Framber. He's been a little bit more up and down this season, but he's coming off a pair of 10 strikeout games, and 3 of his last 4 10 strikeouts exactly in 3 of them. 6 strikeouts in the other one. Gave up 4 earned runs, but made it through 6 innings. Booked the win in the last one. That was against Pittsburgh. A little bit of a disappointing game. He was cheap that day, and he was really interesting for DFS. But I think we can come right back with Framber shares. I'm sure he's not going to be the most expensive pitcher. I really haven't gone through with a fine-tooth comb all the different pricing. We'll do that live on the show. Shota Imanaga going for the Cubs against the Twins. Very talented pitcher, keeping the Twins run total very much in check, especially with the wind at his back. 3.05 implied total is probably the lowest we've seen the Twins all year. And then on the other side, a 3.02 implied total for the Cubbies. They're going up against Pablo Lopez, a very talented pitcher in his own right. Definitely think we can pick off pitching in that game. Feel like it's going to be pretty popular given a 6-run total there. The Red Sox at the Royals, this continues to just be a good series. A lot of offensive upside on either side. That said, they're both kind of landing in the middle of the board. Maybe it makes them a little bit sneakier than they probably should be. 4.11 implied total on the Red Sox side against Seth Lugo, who has been very good this year, has been effective coming off 8 innings, just 3 strikeouts, 2 strikeouts in the game before that, over 6 1/3 against the Cubs, who were very vulnerable to right-handed pitchers for strikeouts like we saw last night. Pat on the back for the Festa play. Had Festa and missed all the bats. My lineup scored 119 FanDuel points, and 50 of it came from the pitcher. It was not a good lineup, but I was happy about the Festa play coming through. Yet another one of those F plays. But Lugo 9 innings in the game prior to the 6-run meltdown over 6 1/3 against the Cubs in that 2 strikeout game. So he's kind of normalized 5 runs over 5 innings to Boston at Fenway back on July 13th. I do expect the normalization to kind of continue a little bit here. So I'm willing to at least consider the Red Sox against Lugo there. I don't love that total, but I think it's a little bit more reflective of, what he's done, not necessarily what he is. So there's always, some reason to consider spots like that. Then it's Brian Bayo going for the Red Sox against the Royals, pushing a 4.5 run total in their direction. Definitely looks like a day we can consider some Royals bats, which is, pretty frequent lately. It's Kyle Freeland going for the Rockies. We are not rostering Kyle Freeland today. Not in Coors Field, not on a day with the Mets pulling the biggest total on the slate at 6.32 runs and an 11.5 run total for the entire game. Luis Severino going for the Mets, not at all interesting to me. 5.31 implied total, kind of interesting for the Rockies on their side. It wouldn't completely stun me if Severino came out, went 5 or 6 quality innings, struck out a handful of hitters, and had an okay day. It's just such a, I don't want to say deep, but it's a slate with a lot of options for pitching of varying quality. So why do you want to target a fairly shaky pitcher at Coors Field? Just doesn't feel right. I'd rather get some Rockies bats, I think, than go to Severino, especially if they're going to come up under owned by comparison like we talk about all the time at Coors Field. A lot of time you can get the home team. People like to go to that. So my hat was a little bit cockeyed. People like to go to that to the visiting team, and that's often the right decision. They're usually the much better team, or they're always the much better team. But the Rockies do get that same benefit of Coors Field, and there are bats in that lineup that we like this year. White Sox against the A's. Jonathan Cannon going for the White Sox. A's definitely in consideration with a 5.01 implied total on their side. And then Ross Stripling going for Oakland. Not a high strikeout pitcher. Facing the worst lineup in baseball. 3.560 implied total for the White Sox. It kind of puts Ross Stripling uncomfortably on the board. We're going to have to at least look at him. I don't know that he can check out as high quality as some of these plays we've used lately against these low-end teams, just because of how low strikeout he is. Season high is 6. It came in the first game of the year, oddly against Cleveland. Had a 5 strikeout game, 2 games after that. Everything since then is a pair of 4 strikeout games and then a 3 strikeout game. And then he went into a decline. No more than 2 strikeouts over 4 or 5 straight starts. A pair of 3 strikeout games and then a 0 strikeout game. Very, very low-end bargain bin kind of quality there. Jonathan Cannon, I just don't think is on the board for pitching. And then we go down to the Tigers and the Mariners. We've got Luis Castillo. Very interesting consideration with the Tigers pulling just a 3.15 implied total. One of the more highly projected pitchers on the slate. And then Kader Montero. He's had a couple of decent starts. He's at least worth looking at against this low-end targetable Mariners lineup. I think we're going to come down preferring the Mariners. They were showing good power against. They're drawing a 4.44 implied total. But we're going to have to at least consider where Kader Montero fits into the board as far as price and popularity and everything go. And then a strong pitching matchup at the end of the night. Clay Kershaw. We'll see how many innings he goes. He gave us 4 in the first game back, 3 2/3 in the most recent one. Allowed 7 runs, 3 of them earned on 6 hits. Struck out nobody, walked 1 in that one. That was against San Diego. Start before that was against the Giants. Went 4 innings, struck out 6, 2 walks, 2 earned runs on 6 hits. Not totally efficient. And then in the first game, and then an ugly one in that second game. If you get 5 quality innings against the Phillies, I don't really see it, but just a 4.27 implied total because it is Clay Kershaw, so it's also difficult to envision, over those innings that he does pitch, did the Phillies really annihilate Clay Kershaw? On the other side, Christopher Sanchez, kind of interesting, tough opponent, obviously, the Dodgers. They got Freddie Freeman back last night. His kid came out of the hospital, very nice to hear, and seems to be on the mend from Guillain-Barré syndrome, which actually, I forget if I mentioned it, a buddy of mine actually had that. Few years back, a bunch of years back now at this point. But just really very weird disease or virus or whatever that you can catch. I don't know if it's like a virus or if it's bacterial or if it's a straight up disease or what, but it entirely paralyzes you. And just like all of a sudden you just wake up, and this is what happened to my buddy. He woke up paralyzed. Couldn't move. Had to go to the hospital. He was in the hospital for like 2 months. And just like, obviously right out of the gate, they don't know what the hell it is. And then they figure it out, and it's this rare-ish condition, but feel like I've been hearing more about it than I had ever heard before he had gotten it. That was the first time I ever heard of it. But a scary condition, and nice to see that Freddie Freeman's kid is doing well. And he'll be back in the lineup presumably today. And the point there was that it is a tough lineup for Christopher Sanchez, but he has been very good this year. So we'll give him some consideration at the end of the night. Looking at the pitching board. So, I mean, right out of the gate, a couple of bargain options right there. DraftKings pricing has been all over the place lately. Am I crazy in that as loose as their pricing has been all year, did they just completely let go of the reins in the last week or so? Like, why the fuck is Luis Castillo 8,200 against Detroit? 97 on FanDuel is correct. I wouldn't have objected to 10 plus. Pablo Lopez 10,000 against the Cubs, again with a 20-mile-an-hour wind at his back. Even without the win, that would have been appropriate. We just saw David Festa dominate that team last night. 8,000 on DraftKings? Heel not on the board anymore, but that was a very good price at 87 against the Angels. 85 for Grayson Rodriguez. Jeffrey Springs, I get. We're not getting many innings, but even that is not terrible. 84 for Framber. Mind-boggling prices. Keter Montero's 5,400. All right, we're definitely going to have to consider him now. This is why I like to leave the pricing reviews for the show, because I hope my surprise and objection to these where these prices are set is coming through. This is a ridiculous DraftKings board. The FanDuel board looks a lot tighter. It looks like normal. You can do whatever you want on DraftKings today with these prices. So Sonny Gray, again, believably at the top of the board, expensive on both sites, 9,600 on DraftKings. Finally, that's one that they got correct. Imanaga, they also got correct at 95. Gray's been pretty terrific through most of the season. Like I said, he basically righted the ship after a couple of little bumps in the road. Very high-end starter against a super gettable Tampa Bay team that does have strikeouts available. Luis Castillo, happy to have him at 97. I think that's a nice little discount by comparison to Lopez, Grayson Rodriguez, Sonny Gray up at the top of the board. Absolutely take that against the Tigers. There's only a couple of hitters to worry about in that lineup, and Luis Castillo is one of the better pitchers in baseball over the last handful of years. I know he's been a little bit diminished this season by comparison to where he's been in the past, but happy to have it in that matchup, and 8,200, absolute bargain on the DraftKings slate. Pablo Lopez, again, against the Cubs. There's a little bit of right-handed strikeout upside. He is a talented pitcher. Another guy who diminished a little bit from what he's been, or what he was last year anyway. 8,000 on the DraftKings slate, though. Not diminished quite that much, not with a 20-mile-an-hour wind at his back and all that strikeout upside. 10,000, I'd love to have it on FanDuel. Feels a little bit tough to get to depending on what bats you want. Maybe if you're going like Rockies at Coors Field, I don't know where exactly they fit in price-wise. Probably does, with all these expensive pitchers on the FanDuel side, probably does pay to pay up for pitching today. I mean, you're going to have to almost. Outside of, and I hate to put it this way, but outside of, let's say, Gator Montero for 71, Ross Stripling for 68, there's not a lot of believable value plays on the FanDuel board because I don't think Jeffrey Springs is getting you that quality start for his 85. I don't think Clay Kershaw is getting you that quality start for his 83, and he's facing the Phillies. Christopher Sanchez at 82 is cheap for his for his talent and his output, but not a great matchup against the Dodgers. FanDuel's a lot more challenging on this slate. You almost have to pay up for pitching on FanDuel today. You could probably get away with Bassett, but you need him to, I mean, but you need him to have that, primo day, because somebody's gonna, out of all these expensive pitchers. Tough board on FanDuel. I like it. Rodriguez, again, just kind of a little bit challenged by a low strikeout Toronto group, but he is very good and has a lot of upside in that spot. 10-3 is not incorrect on FanDuel. 8,500 on DraftKings, not expensive at all, really, for his talent, for his upside. He's more expensive than these guys, oddly, but a lot of talent there. Imanaga for 94 on the FanDuel slate. Love it. 9,500 on the DraftKings slate. Perfectly playable, but by comparison to everybody else, Minnesota is a talented lineup. It's just that's such a good pitching environment today with that 6-run total that I think you kind of have to consider it as one of your pay-ups. At the very worst, he and Sonny Gray are just like, these are the two guys we consider the expensive pay-ups today, and then we can work with a nice range of pitchers in combinations in value spots. So I think he's easy enough to reach, and you just consider him one of the pricey high-end options of the day because, again, that pitching environment is insane today. Springs, just don't think we're getting the depth. Talented guy, 85-73. Even on DK, you're just kind of maybe taking a shot at that win bonus, but they're the team that's facing Sonny Gray. So I don't really love that opportunity at 73, and there's a lot to work with on DraftKings. Fromber at 96 on FanDuel, a little bit tough to reach. I really like Fromber, but I don't love the matchup against Texas for one, and I was hoping he'd be a little bit cheaper than that just based on the season-long form, but I think FanDuel back in the Fromber business based on those recent totals. On the DraftKings side at 8,400, he's a lot more playable. But again, it's just, he's 84, and Luis Castillo against the Tigers is 82, and Pablo Lopez against the Cubs is 8,000. Clay Kershaw is probably going 5. If you want it for 83, 81, it's there, but I don't think we're getting much on top of the median out of Clay. Same thing as Jeffrey Springs. Lugo against Boston, just a really tough opponent and a guy who is pitching over his head for the season. But he's gotten a lot of great results all year long. He's been consistently good all season long. Vegas likes him to keep them somewhat in check. Not an absurdly low total. They're above 4 runs. But not a runaway freight train of a total for the Red Sox either. A lot of dangerous lefties in that Red Sox lineup, though. Bassett just facing that really good Orioles team, but again, the way the pricing works, especially on FanDuel today, I definitely think he's in consideration on both sites. You're just looking to book some clean innings. Gator Montero, definitely going to benefit from price and matchup there. I'm going to have to check the popularity and see how that breaks down. Sanchez, again, just considering how the pricing on FanDuel works, that's going to get more consideration from me now. I hate the matchup, but it's going to have to get more consideration at 8,200. Joker came to say hi. Tail's banging on the back of my chair. 79 on DraftKings, I think, is the same thing. You can at least throw him into the mid-range, but that just checks in, comparative to all these prices. A lot lower end for Sanchez on the DraftKings slate. Stripling's intriguing at these bargain bin prices. We're just dealing with 2-3 strikeout upside, which is the problem. Bayo against KC, problematic on FanDuel at 88, but less so considering where everybody else is priced. So he's on the board as a mixer, at least on FanDuel. Does have a little bit of upside. Needs to keep a very good KC lineup in check. 6,500 on DraftKings, different story. Easy value dart to throw. Molly, don't think you're getting enough pitches, but 7,000, 7,600 is not all that expensive. It's just really good opponent, limited strikeouts. If he was facing, say, the Braves, I'd be a little bit intrigued at those prices, particularly on FanDuel. Again, just given that mix. I do think he's got 5. I don't think he's got 6 in him. Again, 85 pitches probably. Sevy, of course, is a no. Colin Ray for me against the Braves is probably a no. 84 is not cheap enough, I don't think, on FanDuel. I'd probably just go to one of these higher projected guys. 71 on DraftKings is cheap, but it's not like overly offset from any of these guys up here. And I'm typically more a buyer on targeting Colin Ray. What you do get there is he does have the occasionally good strikeout game, and there are strikeouts in that Braves lineup, but they're showing a bunch of power and upside against, and we've got a deep enough pitching slate. Cannon is a pretty hard no against the Athletics. Davis Daniels off the slate. Elder, for me, is a pretty hard no against the Brewers. And Freeland, obviously, a no with the Mets drawing a 6+ implied total. We're down to 10 games. Skipping that one. If you're just getting here, the Orioles or the Angels and the Yankees already postponed. Still nice outside. All right, buddy, why don't you go to your spot, huh? Go lie down. You're a very good boy. Go lie down. You got a long way to go. As we dive into the game by game, let me pull up the chat, see what you guys are talking about. Yep. Jeremy's saying it. Just saw the Yankees game postponed. I just don't know that Elder's really all that good. He had a couple good games in a row. Actually, no, the 9 strikeout game's not even good. He gave up 6 runs in that game. He can give you depth. I mean, we'll consider it. But again, like, look where he fits in on the board for one thing. He's pushing a 4 and change, mid-4s implied total in the direction of the Brewers. Brewers, good opponent. I just think there's enough spots where he's not really landing for me. It's the next game, but like looking ahead, pretty weak numbers across the board. It's only 46 innings and 9 starts. Last year in 31 innings, pretty weak numbers across the board. He doesn't give up a ton of home runs. He comes and he goes in terms of the runs that he allows. But a 4.50 xFIP last year, year before, 4.16. This year so far, a 4.04. 19.5% strikeouts this year, 17.5% the year before. Last year, 20.7 the year before in 9 starts, 54 innings. Again, his attributes are primarily that he doesn't give up a ton of home runs or power. But you can sequence against him. He's not very high strikeout. You can see he's putting a lot of guys on base this year. I won't say that he's an unplayable option at 76, especially as you pointed out on the FanDuel slate. That's at least an effective price. And I wouldn't say that there's substantially more upside in a guy like Kidder Montero against Seattle. Much better matchup. But I don't know that he's much more talented than Elder is. And if you really look, that's a 4-point separation by median projection. It doesn't really mean that their ceilings are all that different. And a 4-point separation on FanDuel is essentially a strikeout. So, based on the opponent, I think that's accurate. If you switched them, I bet they would switch. I can't do that easily enough to... It's not worth me trying to do that. But I bet you those 2 projections would directly switch if I switch the opponents. So a little bit of that is baked in from the Brewer side, but it's important to bear in mind that a 23-point projection FanDuel, 10 points DK versus 12, 13 points, 23 points versus 26, 27 points is not a very gigantic difference in median projection to begin with. And there's nothing about that means they can't get out to equivalent scores. So if Elder works for you at 76, if you have more faith in his, ability to pitch like 6+ clean innings, find a quality start against the Brewers, no issues with it. I don't think he's talented enough that I don't think he's an off the board play just because of where he ranks. A lot of times you get down there, and if I said that he's off the board, forgive me. It's more of a I don't necessarily feel the need to go there. Where like Freeland is just off the board. Davis Daniel against the Yankees would have been pretty much off the board. I think I said Jonathan Cannon pretty much off the board with the A's drawing a 5+ and him being pretty terrible. Elder's better than that. Hopefully that made sense. Sure thing, Doug. Happy to answer questions. Mamba's here. What's going on, Mamba? Lee Price says they totally forgot about the Mets at Coors. Price so cheap. Great. We'll get there. Happy birthday, rotoscouts. I think it's today. In what context? Happy birthday? I launched the site opening day of last baseball season. So technically opening day is our site anniversary. Not sure what you were pulling from. Maybe it's the first day that Mamba found us. Happy anniversary if it is Mamba. Good to see you either way, buddy. Nah, I'm not really worried about a 10-mile-an-hour wind, Lee. Lee Price asked if 10-mile-an-hour wind's blowing in KC negates offense. It's a minor factor, but it's not really something I would go out of my way to like ding anything for. And typically Vegas just accounts for that. There's no real concern there. That'll be baked into your Vegas totals. Stevie Franchise. Don't know what that's referring to. I mean, I know what Steve Franchise is. Oh, Mamba said Stevie Franchise about Steven Leibowitz coming in. What's up, Steven? Good to see you, buddy. All right, let's get into this thing. So our first actual game to talk about here, the Orioles and the Blue Jays. Let me see if we got some lineups. We do. Colton Cowser in the leadoff spot again for the Orioles. Love that bat up at the top of the lineup with all his power upside and frequent appearances up there. Pretty good option as a table setter as well with a 335 on base ahead of their key power bats. Not a bad way to start a stack with the lefty thumper. We already got the Blue Jays going up against Chris Bassett here. Bassett over 123 innings and 22 starts, 21.3% Ks, 4.02 ERA, a 4.29 xFIP. This looks like very much like a Chris Bassett kind of a season. Not terrible for premium contact or barrels, fly ball-ish trajectory, 2.22% home runs, not unmanageable at all. Fits basically in with what he's done in years past. Last year, 3.39, year before 2.55. It's a mid-3s to 4s in the ERA, the xFIP department, so we're not far off the mark. We've lost a little bit of swinging strike upside. We've lost a little bit of strikeout rate year over year, but overall, pitching fairly well. Last time out, went just 4 innings, gave up 5 earned runs. Struck out 3. That's basically your downside Chris Bassett start. That was against this same Orioles squad in Baltimore just last week. That's definitely on the table here. 7,000, 8,000, though, I think that's cooked into those prices. And I do think Bassett's got the upside to come out and give you 5-6 clean innings. That said, he's gone 5 starts in a row with at least 3 earned runs allowed. It was 3 twice, it was 4 once, and 5 twice. Over that stretch, he struck out 3 exactly, bookending it, and then 6 each in the 3 middle starts. Prior to that run, he had a good one against the Yanks, 6 innings, 8 strikeouts, just 1 hit. 7 innings at Fenway, he gave up just 2 runs on 5 hits, but only struck out 2. 6 innings against the Red Sox in Toronto in mid-June. 6 innings, 7 hits, 2 runs, 6 strikeouts. So he's got like 6-7 strikeout upside. Definitely 6-7 okay, 0 to 3 run quality start type innings. But for a talented 2-3 quote-unquote high-end starter, he definitely has a fairly big basement on a lot of days. So I think it's at worst a both-sided spot, and it's really only both-sided because he's at 7,000 on DraftKings, which is highly playable, and 8,000 on FanDuel, which is playable, given especially how FanDuel has everything priced. Oh, I did say I was going to look at ownership real quick. Let me pull up our pals over at RG and see what they're thinking for ownership today. So our buddy Neil Orfield's got a gig with RG starting up for football season, it looked like. Congrats to Neil if you're out there. Good dude. Always good to see good people land on their feet. Not that Neil needed to land on his feet. That was a weird way to put it. Neil was doing fine. Good people to land in places they want to be and they are excited to be. Let's put it that way. That's a weird way to put things. Yeah, so those cheap aces are easily the top 2 owned pitchers on the DraftKings slate. A lot of popularity there. Makes all the sense in the world. And then the 2 expensive guys are the next 2 most owned pitchers. After that, there are 2 guys in double-digit ownership, and then everybody else on the board is in single digits. So essentially the entire slate is putting their pitching together with Pablo, Luis Castillo, Sonny Gray, Shota Imanaga, Framber Valdez, and Grayson Rodriguez. If you roster anyone that's not in that group, you're dealing with a pitcher in single-digit ownership, including Bassett from this game, and it's a lot of mixed quality. Obviously, Montero, Lugo, Stripling, Elder. To that point, then there's a lot of guys you don't necessarily want. Bayo, Sanchez, etc., etc. That is obviously those highest owned guys are obviously the top of our pitching projections. You're going to want basically one of those guys in most of your pitching combinations. But what you can easily do is just start making pivots around all right, expensive guy, don't necessarily go Sonny Gray from the top of the board and directly to Pablo Lopez because he cost $8,000. That's where you're going to run into danger as far as the popularity goes. And you're going to lose a lot of leverage against the slate if you just go directly to those pricey mid or mid combinations among the very top projected pitchers. If you take a step down, you have endless flexibility in ownership. Literally everybody is 5% or lower outside of that group of, again, Pablo Lopez, Luis Castillo, Sonny Gray, Shota Imanaga, Framber Valdez, Grayson Rodriguez. And this is per RG's projections. So, take it for what it is. But, there's good ability to mix things up over there if you just make a slightly different decision at SP2. And we'll find some guys. We'll talk it through. On the FanDuel slate, again, without giving away their actual numbers, it's going to be that same group of pitchers that's the most highly owned. But it looks like basically everybody's just paying up. Kind of like what my read was as I was looking at it. Everybody's just going to the basically the top of the board there. The interesting one from the top is actually Grayson Rodriguez, which can bring us back to this game. And this is on FanDuel. At 10-3, he's drawing mid-single digits popularity in their projections, which puts him right in range with all the meh and the value type guys and the dice rolls as far as the popularity goes. Everybody else from the top of the board, excluding actually Framber against Texas, who's also owned in the mid-single digits, everybody else is owned at least 10% plus. So that does make Grayson Rodriguez a more interesting consideration, given that he projects basically exactly the same. He's got a very good 26.5% strikeout rate, a 3.86 ERA with a 3.57 xFIP. That means he's pitching exactly like what he looks like. 0.3 of a run difference in the positive direction. He's got a dominant 13.6% swinging strike rate, so he can absolutely find some strikeouts. This version of the Jays lineup will also point out 21.5% strikeout rate. That's tossing Joey Loperfido in there now at 38%. I got to remember that he's a part of this team now. You still have Dalton Varsho at 27.1, and a couple of very high strikeout guys in Addison Barger and Leo Jimenez in small samples. To bring up the bottom of the lineup. You've also got Ernie Clement in the low single digits, over 262 plate appearances, and then the stretch of their good hitters are all in the mid-teens. So it's both a little bit higher than it typically has been, while also being potentially a little bit trappy, given that it is all of their dangerous good hitters that are the guys that are very low strikeout. So some give and take around the Grayson Rodriguez play on FanDuel today. But that just became the most interesting pay-up option to me, given how low-owned he's going to be. I don't know that we can get there. He's very difficult to reach as the second most expensive pitcher, but all these guys are going to be more highly owned. So it does at least create an angle. I don't know, by saying it most interesting pitcher, I don't know that that means we're going to actually want to get there, just because it does look like a very limiting price as far as what our stacks are going to look like. But he's a very talented guy. Tough matchup, but I can see it. Looking at the Orioles lineup, Colton Cowser off the top at 4,300 on DraftKings is very, very cheap. Ryan O'Hearn at 41, Ryan Mountcastle at 4,000 looking down that lineup, and then getting to, we'll get to the bottom of it when we get there. But those three guys through the heart of the lineup, through from 1 through 6, all in the 4,000s, is very nice. It definitely makes it easier to afford Gunnar Henderson, their superstar shortstop, at 62. Anthony Santander with all his home run upside at 55. That's an affordable Orioles stack over there, given where those guys are priced. It's similar on FanDuel, but not quite as dramatic. Those threes are a little bit higher than those low fours. 10-plus home run marks for both Santander and Gunnar. Santander's hit 32 so far this year, a 284 ISO. He is legitimately one of the best power hitters in baseball. It's absurd that he isn't more popular than he typically is. He really does tend to fall by the wayside a little bit. I think that's faded a little bit given his performance this year. He's gotten more and more popular as this year goes on, and he's correctly priced now. So we'll see what the pricing does to his popularity, but he's a key bet in any stack of Orioles for me. But Cowser being that cheap at the top, 14.2% barrels and 48.2% hard hits with his 16 home runs and a 206 ISO is dynamite. And again, he can get on base at 335 on base from the rookie is really good, hitting ahead of these power bats now. Gunner's got 29 homers and a 274 ISO with a 165 WRC+, one of the key shortstops to pay up for. O'Hearn at just 41-31, 12 home runs, a 184 ISO, creating runs 27% better than average, getting on at a 347 clip. He's always cheap. He's never popular. He's a great option from the heart of the Orioles lineup if you're going to this stack. Adley's one of the best catchers in baseball. 17 home runs for him, a 115 WRC+, just a 163 ISO on 7.7% barrels and 39.8% hard hits. That's right in line with what his contact has looked like over the last couple of years. What was his ISO last year? 158, yeah. 191 2 years ago. So he was getting more results in terms of extra base hits a couple years ago. But still very, very solid season from the switch hitting catcher. 5,400, happy to pay it if I go to the Orioles on DraftKings. 3,200 on FanDuel. You're just playing like he's a cheap first baseman. You do have two playable guys at first base on this team as well, but Adley's definitely in the mix for shares at that first base util catcher spot. Ryan Mountcastle has 13 home runs on the season, a 169 ISO. His creator runs 9% better than average, a very capable right-handed bat. Comes and goes, but he makes good contact. 9.4% barrels, 45.3% hard hits. Highly, highly playable. Will be lower owned than a lot of the guys above him in the lineup. Then we get to the new trade deadline acquisition. Eloy Jimenez, 3,000 on DraftKings, 2,700 on FanDuel. I know that he's had a rough year. I know that he's hurt all the time. But he's technically still slashing an okay 252, 306, 357. It's not like he's hitting 194. He's getting on base over a 300 clip. That's an okay on base. It's not good, but it's okay. The slug is obviously off. The home run output and the ISO are way, way off. 5 home runs and 258 chances, a 105 ISO. I get it. What we want from Eloy Jimenez is power. But he's got a 9.5% barrel, 50.8% hard hits. That's kind of in line with where he was last year. It's short of where he was 2 years ago in a more complete season, I think, right? 489 chances. No, it was a less complete season that year. That's right. 489 last year, 327 the year before. He hit 16 home runs in the shorter plate appearance sample. That's where the power was. That's from that premium contact uptick that we saw. And then 18 home runs last year. He's been super limited by injuries and just the opportunity of regular playing time and finding consistent footing. But he's been healthy for a stretch now this season. He's in a much, much better lineup. He still murders the ball when he makes contact with it. He strikes out at just a 19.4% clip against a averages strikeout pitcher. For the cheap pricing, do not sleep on Eloy Jimenez at the bottom of the Orioles lineup. Most in particular if you're going to that team. But honestly, if you just need a cheap power bat, that's not awful. I know he only rates out to a 4.40 in the home run model. Part of that is the spot in the lineup. Part of that is the underperformance on the season and the lack of opportunity. But he's there tonight. He's in the lineup. Yeah, that's a really good price. Jackson Holliday is a very good price. 3,100, 2,700. If you haven't noticed, he's been a lot better over his limited opportunities in this return to the majors than he was in that first stretch. 2 home runs on the board now, 135 ISO for the season, of 59 WRC+. But he's been killing it lately, and ridiculous contact so far. He is a superstar in the making. 3,100 at second base is a bargain. 27 shortstop and second base is great. If you need to go to the Ramon Urias option, he's not awful. 5 home runs on the season in 197 chances, just under league average for WRC+. He hit just 4 home runs last year, didn't have a great year in terms of the power, but was okay in the slash line run creation department, and then had the 16 home run season 2 years ago in 445 chances. Just a sneaky cheap option down the bottom of the lineup that is capable of turning on the ball. The Blue Jays are lower end than the Orioles are, for sure. They've got some struggling players. They're facing the better of these 2 pitchers. I do think it's got a limiting factor for them. You can see really only Vladdy on his absurd tear lately at 7.42 in the home run model. Look where Vladdy is now. It's crazy how that season turned around. George Springer for 44-28 has not really turned his season around much. 13 home runs and 13 steals. Maybe he gets to 2020 in a bad year, but it's been ugly for Springer overall. 150 ISO, definitely a player who's capable of that any given slate upside, considering who he's been through his career. But it's gotten rough this year. 44-28, that is baked into those prices. I think you're going to George Springer if you're stacking Blue Jays, but he's not really drawing the eye to the Blue Jays. Joey Loperfido for 25-24, talented rookie, but looks like a rookie right now who's really struggling to find his form. 38% strikeouts, most importantly, feeds the upside for Grayson Rodriguez a little bit. Vladdy for just 52. DraftKings not completely caught up on how absurdly good he's been over the last 2 months, let's say. He's now slashing 316, 389, 537 on the season. His creator runs 60% better than average. He has a 221 ISO, 22 home runs on the board, a 13.9% barrel rate, and 56.3% hard hits against 15.2% strikeouts and 10.3% walks. You think we can make this guy a $6,000 player, or at least the high fives maybe? Still way too cheap on DraftKings. 35 on FanDuel is more correct, but honestly, that's not even correct at this point. He's facing a very good pitcher, yes, but it's Vladdy in full form, full return to form for Vladdy. Spencer Harwitz for 35-26. Hitting for a decent average and getting on base. Most importantly, this is what he does exceptionally well. Very good on base percentage. He's drawing a good walk total, striking out just 16.8% of the time. He's a playable part for them. 120 WRC+. He's not a power hitter, but he has hit 4 home runs in his 191 chances. He's got a good contact profile, but limited in terms of the hard hits. The barrels probably do go down a little bit from here as time goes on, but he's been effective and he just needs to get on base and set the table. I would definitely have put him in the 2 spot and Loperfido there. I'm not exactly sure why they configured the lineup this way, given that Loperfido doesn't really get on base and strikes out in an absurd clip, but has more power than Horwitz. I honestly probably would have gone leadoff Horwitz. If you wanted to leave Loperfido 2 in that situation, fine. I don't know. It's a weird configuration. I get that they want to go lefty-righty. It's staggering through the entire lineup, but that's honestly less important than putting somebody who has a more effective on base higher up and less power higher up than the cleanup spot. At worst, though, he's a good option to reset the table after Vladdy clears the bases. Maybe that's what they're going for here. And he feeds into the Alejandro Kirk, Dalton Varsho part of the lineup. Kirk, a mix and match quality catcher at best, not really a great offensive weapon. 76 WRC+, no power to speak of. Varsho does have power and can steal a base, but only 13 home runs and 9 steals in 384 chances. He's sub Mendoza, sub 300 in the on-base department, just a 90 WRC+, but a lefty with a little bit of power for just 3,400, 2,700 against the righty, the young righty pitcher. I greatly prefer the Rodriguez side of that. I think he strikes Varsho out a couple times. Ernie Clement, very cheap for a guy who puts the ball in play with absurd frequency, 6.9% strikeouts and 2.3% walks, just slashing 272, 292, 416. But an important guy to keep in mind for like thinking about that back control conversation and guys that could take an immediate leap forward with more regular opportunities. Right now, he's just been mediocre and doesn't create a lot of runs. He's got 6 home runs, 7 stolen bases. Mix and match quality play, but a guy with a lot of back control and a good eye play, or good ability to put the ball into play, doesn't really care about walking. Addison Barger, 23-24 across sites, limited options, limited output over 86 plate appearances. Leo Jimenez, same thing, over 73 chances. Both those guys very high strikeout right now, a little bit overmatched in the major leagues right now. Both allegedly talented though. Mix and match plays for cheap prices with multi-position at best. For me, this probably goes Orioles bats, Grayson Rodriguez. Grayson Rodriguez, Orioles bats. Chris Bassett, Blue Jays bats. All 4 parts are playable, but that's the order. Braves, their lineup is in, and it's in the model already. Doesn't look like we've got the Brewers. So we talked a little bit about Bryce Elder already, but if you missed it, ranks out low, but to reiterate, there is not much difference in projection or definitely in ceiling between Bryce Elder from here and even honestly the Jeffrey Springs of the world, because there's like no ceiling on that. The Clay Kershaws of the world, because there's no ceiling on that. Guys who have actual ceiling would be like, Bassett, Montero, Sanchez, guys who are going to pitch full innings, potentially. There's not much separation in these median projections with 4 points, 3 points difference, and the ceiling is equal. So despite projecting down here against a very good team, Elder is at least roughly comparable to some of those options. I just like him less because I have a healthy respect for the Brewers. They're a decent team at getting on base. This version of the Brewers lineup has a collective 335 on base. That does include 72 plate appearances at 389 out of Garrett Mitchell. But even if we leave that out and go with the more complete seasons, we're still at 328. That's an effectively good on base percentage for a full lineup. Most of these guys are creating runs in a positive sense. Just oddly, Bryce Turang, 6 points below average, but a very good DFS option most days. And Sal Frelick, who steals a lot of bases and gets on at a great clip, so is a correlated scoring play, oddly 4 points below average for him. But any given slate upside for both of those players, given how they get on base and stealing bases, scoring runs potentially. So Elder not in the best spot out of those guys that are affordable, but he is affordable and he does have a slight amount of upside. He's not as bad as that 5.67 ERA, but he's probably around a 4.04 type pitcher. Last year, 3.81 ERA with a 4.50 xFIP, call that 4.04, 3.17 and a 4.16. You call that like 3.8, 3.9, but somewhere in the mix, that 4.04 is not off the mark. 19.5% strikeouts against a 10.4% swinging, 28.8% CSW. Not a bad strike thrower. Walks the occasional hitter, 7.3%, totally manageable. Not terrible for power, but there is a lot of premium contact in here. What he does well is limit launch. 2.93% home runs looks about right against that kind of contact. 8.1% barrels. When he makes a mistake, you can definitely drive the ball against him. You can see he doesn't rate out great by stuff plus, but he is a capable enough major league pitcher. He's just more in the vein of like the low strikeout, get through some innings, eat some innings type of a pitcher. And typically, if we're going to those guys because they're low priced, I'd rather do it against the White Sox, against the A's, against the Rockies on the road, et cetera, rather than against the Brewers. Colin Ray, a lot of that basically applies to Colin Ray as well. I don't think he's as talented as Bryce Elder is. Neither does Stuff Plus, if you want to just take that as an easy measurement. 6.5 points below average for Elder, significantly further than that for Colin Ray. Ray's been a guy that we've targeted for home run upside over the last 2 years. Last year in 124 2/3, 22 starts, he gave up a ton of premium contact, ton of exit velo and hard hits, and a 4.45% home run rate. This year it's a little bit more manageable in terms of the results, 3.31% home run rate. But if you actually look under the covers, 9.3% barrels is up from 7.7 last year. He's given up a 14.4 degree average launch. That compares roughly with a 13 degree last year, but it's, more fly ball trajectory, obviously. 41.1% hard hits is slightly down, but on more barrels, that equals more home run potential. 90.5 miles an hour of exit velo is dead on with last year's exit velocity that had that much higher home run numbers. So I feel like he's gotten a little bit lucky to limit home runs to 3.31 so far this year. That feeds the ERA being at 3.59 versus the xFIP at 4.43. I think this is the real number or higher. 18.6% strikeouts is not overly appealing. Neither is the swinging strike or the CSW. So despite the Braves lineup being at a 23.5% strikeout rate, I'm a little bit more skeptical about the Ray play, especially at 84 on FanDuel. At 71 on DraftKings, I think there's enough strikeout potential on the right day that you can roll those dice a few times. Struck out 6 over 5 1/3 against this same Braves team the last time out. 2 earned runs allowed on 2 home runs. That's your downside. That's a moderately effective start. On FanDuel, that's kind of a waste of time. But on DraftKings, you can get away with that. He didn't come away with the win, which probably would be a crucial tiebreak in whether that is a serviceable DFS start or not. Start before that, he struck out 8 against the Cubs at Wrigley over 5 innings. Walked 2, no runs, 4 hits. 2 runs allowed over 5 2/3 to Washington, struck out 7 against the lowish strikeout Nationals lineup, but then got blown up by the Pirates. 7 earned runs, a home run, struck out just 3, walked 2 over 5 innings. There's a lot of bad in with the upticks of good. Looks like a little EKG for Colin Ray. Again, here it's okay. Over here, a little bit more skeptical. Like the power upside for the Braves. I made Matty Olson the home run pick of the day. He's at 9.78 in the home run model, but that's good enough for me. I'm going to call that the magic number. Same thing for Jorge Soler at the top of the lineup at 9.47. And then you get Riley and Ozuna, both actually above the magic number. A little bit of power down lineup, too, if you need to go that direction. So I prefer the Braves stack in the head-to-head here against Ray, but I won't begrudge you DraftKings shares of Ray. On the Brewers lineup, Bryce Turang, again, a little bit below average for WRC+, but getting on at a 322 clip, regularly leading off against righties. Very quality option at second base for a fair price, $4,100, $2,800. Even if you're just getting the on base with the stolen base potential and some run scoring out of them, those prices are cheap enough that works for me, especially in Brewer stacks. 6 home runs, 32 steals. 262, 322, 360. Capable enough player, low strikeout. I like the option. Jackson Chourio getting a shot in the second spot in this projected lineup, 3,900, 2,700. When he's high up the lineup, definitely a very appealing option. Didn't immediately step into superstardom, but he's been a lot better as the season has gone on. And right now we're at 356 plate appearances, and the rookie season is looking pretty good. 103 WRC plus, 3 points above average. He's hit 12 home runs. He's stolen 13 bases, 266, 310, 420 out of literally one of the youngest players in baseball. That's not bad for such a young kid who got aggressively promoted. And the barrels have been steadily climbing. The hard hits are up to 43.4%. Another kid, just a superstar in the making. 3,900 is very cheap. 2,700 is also very cheap, but this is aggressively cheap. For Jackson Chourio against Bryce Elder, that's really, really affordable. William Contreras, 51, 31, 12 home runs on the season, 152 ISO, limited for his power output this year, but 279, 351, 431, a dynamite catcher option for correlated scoring, and he does hit the ball extremely hard. 19.2% strikeouts to go with that. He draws walks. He gets on base. Creating runs 20% better than average. Willie Adames at 48.33 is affordable. 17 home runs, 12 steals. A very solid season out of Adames, getting on at a 331 clip. His created runs 13% better than average. He also hits the ball pretty hard from the shortstop spot. You could do worse at shortstop than Willie Adames. He's one of the more qualified, next tier price-wise options on the board. 3,700, 2,500 for Jake Bauers is fairly cheap for a lefty with a little bit of power. 8 home runs, 8 steals, a 175 ISO over 246 opportunities. And you can see he strikes the ball pretty effectively from the left side for those prices. Rhys Hoskins, different option at first base. Right-handed hitter, 4,200 on DraftKings with all his premium contact has upside. 6.34 leads this team in the home run model today. He's got 19 on the year at 220 ISO. That's all Rhys Hoskins is paid to do, is hit these home runs and deliver that kind of ISO with extra base hit upside, knock some runs in. So I don't dislike the option at 42.29. You can make the argument for Jake Bauers probably at lower ownership, a lower price from the left side against Elder. On FanDuel, you can have both because Bowers has outfield eligibility, but you're only getting 4 guys overall, obviously. Frelick on base, stolen base, and correlated scoring upside, but only a 96 WRC plus, like I pointed out before. Joey Ortiz, 34.25. Earlier in the season would have been a bargain. Right now, just kind of okay. He does have a very good 343 on base. He does have a very good 9 points above average WRC plus, but you can see the limited output now. 7 home runs and 6 stolen bases. Feels like it's been a minute since he's done either of those things. 242, 343, 390 overall. Still a good rookie season out of him, but the output has been a little bit more limited lately. Drawing a great walk rate, not striking out much. Good player, but for DFS upside, probably more in the top 7 hitters. Garrett Mitchell also has been very effective over 72 chances. This is a 1 through 9 kind of a lineup. You could play any combination of these hitters against Bryce Elder here. So more inclined to go toward the Brewers. Elder, again, from the bottom of the board, just a mix and match dart throw of a play for me. And then the lineup that I am even more interested in is these Braves against Colin Ray. Like I said, Soler and Olsen both call it at the magic number. 12 home runs on the season for Jorge Soler in a pretty bad downturn year over year, but a very, very capable right-handed power bat who is making good contact. He's up to 10.5% barrels. That was 8 and change just a few weeks ago. So he's barreling the ball more. The power's going to come. 170 ISO, 111 WRC plus, getting regular shots in the leadoff spot for this team. Good option for that. He's always hit up toward the top of the lineup. I love him with the bonus plate appearances for the cheap price. Love the upside. Wouldn't sleep on Soler today. 52-34 for Austin Riley, 15 home runs, pulled his season together up to a 196 ISO, 117 WRC plus, slashing 261, 326, 457. He's still underpriced by a couple $100 compared to where we would have had him the last couple of years. The contact profile is really healed, 14.4% barrels, 53.3% hard hits. Dynamite output from the third baseman now. 58-39 for Ozuna. Tons of power out of him. 32 home runs on the season, a 280 ISO. 15.04, one of the more highly projected guys in the home run model for the day. Olsen for 5,000, 3,400. Effectively, again, another guy discounted by a few $100 from where we would normally encounter Matt Olsen. That's on the back of a rough year overall. 226, 306, 413, 99 WRC plus, just a 187 ISO. But we're up to 18 home runs, a little bit of a surge, I believe, over the past few days. What's he done? There's an uptick there, right? I don't have his game log memorized. I feel like that's end of last week. 2 home runs on the 31st and a homer on August 1st. Bit of a cool last couple days, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. But nice to see the power output, and that's actually 9. We'll give it a 10-game sample to make it fair. Over the last 10 games, he has 5 home runs, a 429 ISO, 14.6% walks, but 43.9% strikeouts. 229, 341, 657, and a 165 WRC plus. That looks a whole hell of a lot like the Matt Olsen that I know. So happy to have him for the discount. Home run pick of the day at 9.78. Despite other guys being higher projected in the model. Love the lefty bat against Colin Ray for power. Orlando Arcia, playable shortstop, 3,100, 2,800, just a few spots down from, say, the Willy Adames tier, but he's cheaper. That's baked into those prices now. He's up to 11 home runs. He's kind of gotten his act together a little bit at least. Over 400 plate appearances, 226, 271, 367 is still problematic. Still 25 points below average for run creation, but he's got an outside shot at equaling last year's home run total if he has a good last 7 weeks of the season. Travis d'Arnaud for 39.29, a very effective second catcher bat. 11% barrels, 40.5% hard hits. We've talked about him all season with Murph in and out of the lineup. 11 home runs this year, 222 ISO, 124 WRC plus. One of our favorite sneaky catchers going back to last year and beyond. Just tons of premium contact. Very good option for very, very cheap pricing against a gettable pitcher. Don't sleep on Travis d'Arnaud either. Eddie Rosario, I'm more comfortable with you taking a nap while we talk about Eddie Rosario than those other guys. 177, 217, 320. That said, does have lefty pop, 42.2% hard hits. He's got 10 home runs. He's stolen 9 bases. Just a 143 ISO. But against Colin Ray, does have the ability to hit one out of the park. Whit Merrifield, mix and match quality, 3,000, 2,300 across sites, having a terrible season. Worked his way over to the Braves from their division rival. Dead at the Mendoza line, 22 tenths or 200ths of a point, whatever. He's at the 280 on base percentage, well below 300. That's what I'm trying to stutter out there. Skippable option down toward the bottom of the line. Kelenic a little bit better than that, 3,500, 2,700. He's got a little pop, 12 home runs, another lefty bat. I probably like Kelenic a little bit better than Eddie Rosario, despite being 2 spots lower in the lineup, just based on the premium contact that he's made. A little bit of a dip for Eddie. So I'll take the Kelenic shares, and he'll probably be lower owned down there, but he hasn't been at all consistent or that high quality. Lost his spot in the leadoff role, obviously. For me, this goes Braves bats, Brewers bats, Colin Ray, Bryce Elder, and those 2 guys are very, very close, and I don't care if you skip them. Actually, no. I'm going to say Elder, Ray. Those are essentially the same. Actually, on FanDuel, he's slightly ahead. It probably is Bryce Elder over Colin Ray, but 2 pretty skippable pitchers. Rays and Cards lineups are both in. Jeffrey Springs, I just think you're limited on innings. I really don't think you're getting... If he gets 5, I don't think you're getting any more than 5. It's a little bit of a tough option there. Cards lineup's already in here. On the Cards side, you've got $9,600 Sonny Gray to work with on DraftKings. One of the more highly priced pitchers, but very, very worth it at the top of the board. Highest projected pitcher on the slate. 3.72 ERA, but a even better, full run better, 2.70 xFIP. Dynamite. 30.8% strikeout rate, 5.9% walk rate. I think that was like 32, low 32s a couple starts ago, but still a very effective, best season of his career out of Sonny Gray. 12.8% swinging strike rate, 30.7% CSW. Hasn't lost a lot to power despite 9.3% barrels, 40% hard hits, 90 point. I mean, these are all over the line, but it hasn't really burnt him. He's effective enough at a 10-degree average launch angle at keeping the ball in the yard. He had 1 bumpy 4 home run game, 3 starts back against Atlanta. 7 innings, he gave up 8 hits, 5 earned runs. 4 of those runs came on, or excuse me, I keep saying it that way. It's not the right way to say it. 5 home runs that came on 4 home runs. 10 strikeouts in that game, though. It's a weird offset to that terrible meltdown. Game after that, he also gave up 5 earned runs. Over 5 innings, struck out 7 against the Nationals. Struck out 9 Cubs in the most recent one. And like I said, that's a little bit of a return to form. He had also given up 5 runs to the Nats back at the beginning of July. 2 earned runs over 7 innings to the Cubs at Wrigley. Struck out 9, gave up a home run. But that was a very good start. And now he gets to face a Rays lineup that has a 26.9% strikeout rate in it. That's dynamite. So I think I've said dynamite about Sonny Gray like 4 times now. It's a very effective option if you can afford it from the top of the board on both sites. Just a little bit difficult to reach given what we want to do with bats. You do have a ton of value to put them together with on DraftKings, though. Just like I was saying before, don't necessarily go, all right, Sonny Gray and Pablo Lopez, because that's what everybody's doing. Don't necessarily go Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo. These guys are going to be your most highly owned guys on the entire slate. You make one different decision down in this territory, and you've differentiated all your lineups. Springs, in his 3 2/3, was not overly effective. Gave up 2 earned runs on 6 hits, struck out 3, walked 1, gave up a home run. Did get stretched out to 5 innings in the minors in his rehab run. He made a bunch of starts, but not a ton of quality here. 2 years ago, he was pretty good. 2.46 ERA with a 3.29 xFIP, a 26.2% strikeout rate, 5.6% walks. If we had any idea that this guy was going to arrive today, that would be more interesting. I just don't know that we're getting beyond 5 innings. The Cards, effective enough as an opponent on the other side. 23% strikeout rate would work well against that strikeout rate from 2 years ago. If you're going to play Jeffrey Springs, do it on DraftKings. It's the only playable spot. At 85, I really, in spite of what that projection might look like, and that honestly might be a little bit high, that's just working kind of off his strikeout numbers from a few years ago. But if you're going to play him, it's at 73 where the quality start doesn't matter and you're okay with just 5 innings. That's shaky. But he does obviously project out well. It's just, as I've been saying, I don't think there's ceiling on this. And there is ceiling for more of these guys behind him on the board. Raise bat's not the greatest idea against Sonny Gray, but you could probably roll the dice a few times. It's not a situation where I'm going to say you have to hedge Sonny Gray play at all. I think they're a very good target for Sonny Gray, and I'm not worried about them. But there are just enough bats in this lineup in terms of capability and just interesting DFS output. They're grabbing a few contrarian shares of what will definitely be a low-owned Rays lineup. In 150 lineups, sure. In 20 lineups, maybe not. Maybe in like 1 or maybe 2. That's probably pushing it. But Johnny Diaz, I like the bet. He's had a down season for him, but he is still at 277, 333, 410, 10 home runs, a 115 WRC plus. So that's a bad season for him compared to where he's been over the last 2 years. You can see the contact is down. Strikeouts and walks are down, but strikeouts are right where they should be. But he's lost a lot of capability, but this is still not a bad season, especially from just a guy, if you're looking at him as a table setter in the leadoff role. Brandon Lau has tons of power. If Sonny Gray is going to give up this kind of premium contact, I like the home run upside for Brandon Lau. 6.24 in the home run model, is reflective of who Sonny Gray is over time and how he's managed to keep the ball in the yard this year. But Lau has upside. Chris Morel also has that same kind of power upside. 20 home runs on the season, but just a 184 ISO and 96 WRC plus, mostly due to a 197 305 front end of his triple slash. But for 4,300, 3,000, second and third base eligible, there's intriguing power in play there. Josh Lowe, 3,900, 2,900, has 7 home runs and 10 stolen bases, had an effective day the other day. He's just made 205 plate appearances this year, coming off a very good season last year, 20 homers, 32 steals. Solid year, 292, 335, 500. So another guy that you can consider an effective bat from the left side and a very playable part at a cheap price who will not be popular at all. Jose Siri, 3,200, 2,800, has 14 homers and 10 steals. Very limited in terms of the slash line, 11 points below average, but a capable enough DFS play, and look how hard he hits the ball. 15.5% barrels and 42.8% hard hits. Again, Sonny Gray, when people are able to make contact against his very good swinging strike rate and strikeout rate, there is a lot of premium contact available there. It's just, can you elevate? This isn't an elite launch angle. It's not a negative, or a Fromber or a Logan Webb type one. But it's a good one. Caballero, mostly here for stolen bases. He's got 28 on the year, but just a 291 on base. Not the best correlated scoring play. 88 WRC plus. Ben Rortvedt, for a limited catcher, not having a terrible year, but just 3 home runs, 256, 349, 350. Good for correlated scoring and on base, but you need more out of your catcher play more often than not. So limited down the bottom of the lineup on both sides. Johnny DeLuca for 25, 24, 3 home runs, 8 steals. Pretty bad. 63 WRC plus over 210 plate appearances. And then Taylor Wall's pretty limited so far this season in 134 chances. He's just stolen 6 bases. It's really all he's good for. So it's kind of a short lineup. I would clip it like here. But that top 5, if you're looking for like a weird angle into the slate, like I said, a couple of dice rolls, but in a very, very limited sense and only in a large portfolio of lineups. Or if you want to get really funky with a single lineup build. But this is at least intriguing, right? Double-digit barrels for all those guys. That's an average 13.6% barrel rate for those 4 hitters. It's an average 44.3% hard hit. If we factor in the hard hit for Johnny Diaz at the top, it goes up to 45.4. So there is quality at the top of the Rays lineup, and nobody's going to go there. And Sonny Gray is stupid popular. That said, again, greatly prefer the Sonny Gray side of that equation. On the card side, for the innings that Springs is going to be in there's definitely a little bit concern about him finding his form. So maybe a little bit limited, but you could see an 8.81 for Wilson Contreras is kind of interesting in the home run model. Paul Goldschmidt at 6.90, Nolan Arenado just 5.05, and then a couple quality numbers from 2 lefties later in the lineup that are a little bit more shaky. But there is a little bit of power through the heart of the lineup there. They're somewhat threatening. But just a 4.13 implied total doesn't exactly rocket them to the top of the stack rankings either. They're just kind of effectively in the middle where they've been for most of the season. Oh, Victor Scott's back. I didn't realize that. Top of the board, Mason Wynn, 46.29. Another guy that just kind of fits into that affordable mid-range of shortstops like Jeremy Pena that we've talked about a number of times in that context. No superstar at all. More of a table setter for real baseball purposes, where he's a little bit more limited for DFS, but 9 home runs, 10 steals, a 108 WRC plus, just a 134 ISO. He's okay to play there if you're going to this team and building out a full stack, but he probably wouldn't make it into like a 3-man stack for me. He's not the best DFS option. Tommy Pham, intriguing enough player, 6 home runs, 6 steals, 274, 334, 402. Another guy who's very capable of setting the table. He's also capable of creating individual scoring with a little bit of home run or stolen base quality. It's been a more limited season of output for Pham, but we can excuse that somewhat, playing a little bit unenthusiastically on the White Sox. We'll see what he can give us with the Cards. Contreras, one of the top catchers in the game, 11.7% barrels and 48.1% hard hits, 13 homers, a 219 ISO. Probably the best offensive player on this team this year. Paul Goldschmidt at 48, 3,000, an underwhelming season, 17 home runs in 473 chances. Even though that looks okay in comparison to everybody else on this team, like it looks in line with some of these guys, that's not the best output for 473 opportunities from Paul Goldschmidt. We're getting toward the back end with Goldie. 156 ISO and 91 WRC+. Arenado just doesn't hit the ball very hard anymore. 11 home runs. He does have a 266, 319, 387. He's deceptively been the better between him and Goldschmidt. 101 WRC+, 10 points higher than Goldie, but only 1 point above league average. Not a good season out of either of the two grizzled veterans. Alec Burleson for 44.28 remains pretty cheap for a guy slashing 275, 311, 461 with 19 home runs and 412 chances. That's not a bad price. It's just the lefty-lefty that I don't love, but let's see what he's doing lefty-lefty this year. Burleson this year, lefty-lefty, yeah, that's not great. 198, 224, 288 with a .090 ISO and only 3 of his 19 home runs over 118 plate appearances. So a lot more limited, at least starting out against Springs. And then Gorman was doing better against lefties earlier in the year, let's say. Not so much. Not that he's a good hitter overall. Good power bat overall. But against fellow lefties, dips to a 162 ISO. He's got a 228 ISO against righties. And 4 of his 19 home runs have come against fellow lefties. So despite being quality power bats and affordable and cheap, those guys facing Jeffrey Springs probably twice is not exactly ideal for your DFS upside. Pedro Pajes, just a backup catcher, 225, 275, 325, nothing to write home about there. Victor Scott is potentially the fastest man in all of baseball. That said, he was completely ineffectual over 68 opportunities earlier in the season. .081, got on base at a 132 clip and had a 129 slug. In 336 chances in AAA this year as a 23-year-old after going back down. Not all that much better, honestly. 219, 302, 318. This is a guy who last year in 310 chances in AA had a 323, 373, 450 slash line with a 119 WRC plus and stole 44 bases in 310 chances in AA, and then had also made 308 plate appearances in high A in 2023 and added another 50 stolen bases. So if you are struggling to do the math there, he stole 94 bases in the minor leagues in 2023. He's only got 31 between the show and AAA this year in 336 chances. It's about half as many chances. So if you extrapolate, we're well off the pace, but that's still a good stolen base total. I just really question whether he's able to even get on base since he can't do it in AAA demonstrably. I question whether he's ever going to be able to do it in the show. He's the dead min. If he gets on base, he's running. If he reaches first base, I can almost promise you he's going to try to steal second. There's a little bit of value there if you're going to the Cardinals, but it's a very shaky play. It's just because he's mid-priced. Use him as a wraparound play back to the top if you're going to do it. Better on DraftKings probably, where you get 5 instead of 1 or 4 on FanDuel. Sonny Gray way up top. Cards bats after him, but I could easily leave the Cards on the table at a limited run total. And then just the top 5 hitters from the Rays as like a sneaky contrarian angle. Again, don't get carried away with it. This is not me saying like, hey, that's the killer spot of the day or anything. I'm just saying like nobody's going there and they are capable. Doesn't look like we've got these lineups in yet. So Tyler Mahle, again, if you missed it at the beginning of the show, 4 2/3 and 74 pitches in his last rehab start. That was the 6th of 6 rehab starts, but he didn't really get stretched out until the last 2. He went 4 innings against the Dodgers affiliate in AA, two back, and then on the 31st against Houston's AAA affiliate, 4 2/3. He faced 17 hitters in that one, 16 in the outing before that. Prior to that, he didn't go more than he didn't complete 3 innings, faced a maximum of 10 hitters in the 4 rehab starts before that. So I think we are pretty hard limited between, let's say, 75 and 85 pitches. And he's facing the Astros, who are striking out with this projected version of the lineup at a 19.2% clip. They've got some deadly good hitters in the lineup. It's not a spot necessarily where I'm going to run off and roster Astros, though I think they're playable with a mid-4s total. 4.37 implied total. I do think they're playable. They're the Astros. There's a lot of quality there, and they'll probably be a little bit underowned. But it's more of a on the Astros because I do think Mahle's a talented pitcher. And it's a pretty hard no on Mahle, even at price, 76, 7,000. I don't see him getting the upside to a 6-inning quality start with a bunch of strikeouts on FanDuel. Not that you need the bunch of strikeouts part of that, but I still do think you would need at least 6 innings to pay this off. 76 on DraftKings. Even with just needing 5, he's more playable probably there, despite this being a much lower price. 85 pitches. I would be surprised. I would land somewhere between surprised and knock me out of my chair if Tyler Mahle won the slate today. Framber Valdez at 8,400, highly playable on the DraftKings slate. 22.6% strikeout rate on the year now after a couple biggies. 3.56 ERA with a much better looking 3.25 xFIP underneath it. 10 strikeouts again in 3 of his last 4 outings. One of those came with some runs, 4 earned runs on 6 hits in 6 innings against the Pirates in his last one. But again, 10 strikeouts offsets that. He just didn't get the quality start, but he did get the win. 10 strikeouts over 6 1/3 against the Dodgers in the start before that. It was a more limited version of the Dodgers, but it's still the Dodgers on the top end. 4 hits, no runs, 2 walks. 6 strikeouts and 4 walks in the rougher one against Seattle. We definitely had him that day. Only gave up 2 runs, 5 2/3, 2 runs on 3 hits. He walked 4, so probably just was nipping in around the edges and just lost a couple hitters to walks against that super gettable Seattle team. But not a terrible meltdown. Would have liked to have gotten one more hitter to get the quality start at least in that one. And then a 10 strikeout game over 7 against Miami. That's a very gettable team. Earned run meltdown of the season was 8 runs against the Angels all the way back on May 20th. Since then, he hasn't given up. Well, he gave up 5 against the Giants in early mid-June. And then the 4 earned runs in the most recent start. Other than those, he hadn't given up more than 3, and he only did that twice. Framber remains a very good pitcher, and the strikeouts are back. Or presumably. You can see Stuff Plus loves him. He is utterly elite at keeping the ball on the ground and limiting home runs and limiting power against. What it sometimes equals, as I pointed out before, when you do get these extreme hard hit numbers and a lot of exit velocity, on that low launch angle, every now and again he'll get balls smoked through the infield that leads to base hits, that lead to BABIP, that lead to some innings against. But overall, he is elite. Just facing a Rangers lineup that is effectively low strikeout, 20.1% for this projected version of the Rangers lineup. They've got a lot of talent in this lineup. They're getting a little bit healthier with Josh Young back there. Adolis Garcia is still really struggling overall for the season, but tons and tons of talent. Same thing with Marcus Semien at the top of the lineup. Corey Seager's a superstar. It's, they're having a bit of a hangover season, I think, overall, but there's still a lot of talent there. So it's not my favorite target to throw Framber at. 96 on the FanDuel board makes him a little bit easier to reach than some of those other guys. And if his popularity is going to be a lot lower, I will at least consider it. But they could have done us more favors with the price. DraftKings did you those favors. 8,400 is a dynamite price for Fromberg in any matchup. Look at the Astros lineup first going up against Molly. So I didn't put any numbers on Molly because it's been a minute. Just 25 and 2/3 in 5 starts last year before he fell off, and we haven't seen him since. In 120 and 2/3 over 23 starts 2 years ago, a 4.40 ERA, a 4.03 xFIP, 11% swinging strikes, 25% strikeout rate, very effective in terms of strikeouts, limited in terms of the barrels to premium contact that he allows, but he is a fly ball trajectory pitcher. So some believable home run upside for at least the top 3 in the Astros lineup. Jose Altuve at 8.28, Alex Bregman at 7.12 and up to 15 home runs on the year, and Jordan Alvarez 11.25 with 20 home runs on the board and a 226 ISO, 151 WRC plus, and their best overall bat. $6,000 is a perfectly fine price to pay for Jordan Alvarez. $3,800 is honestly $200 to $300 cheap on the FanDuel slate. Over 459 chances he's slashing 298, 383, 524. Yes, it's a little bit down across the board for Alvarez, but he's still one of the very best hitters in baseball, and a big rush over the last chunk of the season here, and that's a totally that line gets normalized to previous seasons in a hurry. Bregman is still really cheap at 4,400 at third base on DraftKings, 31 on FanDuel, still a little bit cheap as well. Up to a 162 ISO, creating runs 2% better than average. Looking a lot more like Alex Bregman over the last 2 months. 51.36 for Altuve is affordable, downright cheap on DraftKings. You know, I know that 5,000 is a not cheap price, but cheap for the talent. 14 home runs, 15 steals, 301, 352, 442. Remains one of the best table setters in the game and is just elite at second base at creating individual scoring. 26% better than average for run creation on the year. Jainer Diaz for 4,400, that 45.8% hard hit against 7.8% barrels and just 14.5% strikeouts with 4.3% walks. Say it with me. A lot of well-struck balls put in play. Love the catcher option from this lineup. Where you have to play the position, that 4,400 is just a dynamite price. I'm going to keep harping on it. 112 WRC plus, killer slash line, 295, 324, 439. He's hit 10 home runs. With all that premium contact, there is more power in that bat. It's a great option at those prices. Pena, basically the example of that, like, yeah, he's effective enough from the mid-range. If you want to get cheap at shortstop, you can play him. If you're building Astros stacks, you can play him, but I don't want him in comparison to like Bobby Wick, Gunnar Henderson. He's been the guy I've been naming as the example of that, and that's exactly what he's done. 9 home runs, 12 steals, dead at league average for run creation, so he's a mix and match caliber shortstop, but one of the more playable middle-of-the-board type options on the Astros after the top 3. John Singleton, less than that, 2,600 across sites. He is cheap. He does have 9 home runs, just a 124 ISO. Just really paid to be a lefty power bat, and he's kind of limited in that sense. He's also pretty high strikeout. You can get there, but there's probably a better first baseman on the team that you're combining the Astros with. Jake Myers having a decent season, 11 home runs, 8 steals. That's down to a 95 WRC plus, a 164 ISO. Mix and match outfielder, just another outfielder type of price. Chas McCormick I actually like better since he's cheaper, 25, 26 across sites. Just 4 home runs and 7 steals in a downturn of the season, but a lot of ability there. If he's in the lineup, I would go there instead of Myers for cheaper. They're basically the same guy this year. You know, I'm not that concerned about the differences. And then you get Victor Caratini, who we talk about a decent amount of the time when he's in the lineup. If he's down there, you can definitely go to him. I just obviously prefer Jainer Diaz. On FanDuel, it would be a really weird decision to play both of those guys, but you can do it if you want for a cheap price. Caratini's got weird power. 5 home runs and 137 plate appearances, and that's not uncharacteristic. A 179 ISO, creating runs 10% better than average on what is just very good, very frequent, and regular over the years premium contact. And he's low strikeout, low walk, so he's putting a lot of balls in play with all that good contact. Victor Caratini for a backup catcher, you know, he's not Travis d'Arnaud, but he doesn't have to be for where he's priced. 7 home runs last year, 9 home runs the year before, and 314 and 226 chances respectively. It's a playable DFS option for very, very cheap and extreme low ownership if you're going to the Astros. Let me actually take a sip of this coffee instead of just holding the mug. I'll also take this moment to pop in a chat and see what you guys are talking about. Trey's got Michael Talia and Lawrence Butler as his home run picks. I like Talia, obviously. Been raving about him since he came into the league. No questions. Doesn't look like worth diving into. Anthony Taylor wants to know if we could play Tigers. It doesn't really look like the best spot in the world to me. If you want to get super contrarian, maybe. So pulling it back up, going to the Rangers side of things. Semien remains inexpensive for his career history at the top of the lineup. 315 on base, just a 100 league average WRC plus, 16 home runs. It's been a limited season, but nothing that he's done is all that far off the mark. So I continue to believe that, like any given slate, he can immediately switch flips and he has a dynamite last handful of weeks of the season. Like, the barrels and the hard hits are basically identical to the last 2 years. The strikeouts are lower than last year. The walks are basically identical. There's nothing going on that would be extremely indicative of, like, this is why he's not as good this year. So, maybe he was just getting lucky all those seasons and it wore off. I don't know. 5,300, 3,600 at shortstop is very affordable for a player of Corey Seager's talents. 23 home runs at 219 ISO, 133 WRC plus. Easy to afford, top priority bat in this Rangers stack. Wyatt Langford, 41-28, 6 home runs, 9 steals from the rookie. 12 points below average for run creation. Definitely not the rookie season they were hoping for out of him, but there's some really strong indicators. He's got a decent walk rate, a low strikeout rate. 41.3% hard hits is pretty good. He's come on a little bit, in the back half of the season, has been better than the first half of the season anyway. And remains affordable if you're stacking up Rangers. He's not my top priority. I'd rather go like Semien, Seager, Young, Garcia, and then maybe one of the cheaper guys, or maybe I just go in a different direction from that point. But he's very, very playable. Young, for just 4,100, has been hitting the ball exceptionally hard in his limited sample of 40 plate appearances so far. He's got 3 home runs at 378 ISO. He was very good in his opportunities last year. Definitely a quality bat to find for just 4,100 on DraftKings. That's very cheap. 3,100 on FanDuel is effectively cheap, but this is an extreme discount for his talent. Look at last year, 11.9% barrels and 47.1% hard hits. That came over 515 chances. He hit 23 home runs. He had a 201 ISO, created runs 10% better than average. That is a good right-handed power bat. Adolis Garcia for just 4,500 is also, I don't care about the 209, 273 on the front end of the slash line. I do care because it's really limited him in my OPS league this year, which is a pain in the ass. But he is still 18 home runs, 9 stolen bases. Even that, the home run output, the ISO, the 177 ISO. I just care that he's so cheap for the player that I know is in there. 11.7% barrels, 47.8% hard hits are down from last season. They're down from the year before. But those are still very good numbers for just your average player. You take a lump of clay, you make him into a baseball player, and you give him those numbers, I'd be saying, wow, that guy's an interesting player for these prices. So, yes, it's a bad season for Adolis Garcia, but at these prices, he's a spectacular option if you're going to this team. The entire team is limited by the fact that they're facing Fromber. You can see it in the home run model. Fromber takes home run upside away and doesn't give it back most of the time. So the Rangers are not a good stack today, but these two guys are very good options if you go to that stack today. Robbie Grossman, 27-26, just another outfielder. He's cheap, but he doesn't do much on the field. 96 WRC plus, limited output over 185 chances. Jonah Heim, 10 home runs on the season, an effective enough catcher bat, but just a 114 ISO, just a 73 WRC plus. He's just cheap with the ability to occasionally knock the ball over the wall, but not really worth reaching for in that many lineups. Ezekiel Duran, Leota Taveras at the bottom of the lineup, mix and match quality guys from the 8 and 9 spot who can give you infrequent output. You can see the 9 home runs, the 12 steals for Taveras, but 20 points below average for run creation. They're just cheap. They're playable. You get 4 positions from Duran on FanDuel for 23, just third base and outfield for 23 on DraftKings. It's a limited lineup. It's mostly the top 5 if you're going there. And again, the most limiting factor is this. 1.3 degree average launch this year, 4.2 last year, negative 3.6 the year before, and it was negative 5.5 the year before that. Fromber, Astros bats, really nothing from the Rangers side, if I'm being honest, but I would say Rangers bats well above Tyler Mahle just because I don't think he's getting the innings and I don't think it's the right opponent to chase. Twins and the Cubs. Seems like there's not much good cause to play bats in this game, like at all. And if you weren't here for the beginning of the show, there's a 20-ish mile an hour wind blowing in at Wrigley today. And that's something that we definitely pay attention to. Wind at Wrigley is probably, outside of like rain, one of them, if not the most important weather factor in all of baseball, one of. And it's pretty extreme today. And if you need more proof of that, a 6-run total. I think that's the lowest we've seen all year. I don't remember a lot of 6-run totals just in like the last few years of doing this. That's extreme. This game, put it in perspective, this game is implied for fewer runs than the Mets are. Mets at 6.32, this entire game at 6. Even if they give it another half run and make it 6.5, that's essentially the same. Two really good pitchers. It's not just the wind. Both of these guys are talented pitchers. Pablo's not having the best year. 4.65 ERA. But that's just results oriented. 3.92% home run rate is part of that. Some home runs have gotten away from him. 3.23 xFIP. Just a 5.5% walk rate. 27.8% strikeouts over 124 innings and 22 starts. 13.3% swinging strike rate. There's really not that much wrong with Pablo's season outside of some results-based thinking. I don't think he's like reverted to this guy necessarily because we've still got basically 5 points of strikeout, or 4 points of strikeout rather, on top of where he was there. He took a major leap. This was when he was still with Miami, and then he came to Minnesota, took a major leap working with their staff. And he's slipped a little bit for some of that. Like we've lost a little bit of the swinging strike, we've lost a little bit of the CSW, but these numbers are still better than they were 2 years ago. Well, the CSW is about the same, but the swinging is up. So I don't think he's completely reverted, but we've lost a little bit of the improvement that we had last year, but the xFIP is right in line. He's always been a better pitcher than his results have been. At 8,000 on DraftKings, that is an absolute bargain. He's just going to be really, really popular. 10,000 on FanDuel, I'm hoping limits him a little bit more than he otherwise would be, but he looked really popular on the FanDuel slate as well. We just saw David Festa strike out 9 of these Cubs. I promise you Pablo Lopez, at least right now, is a better pitcher than David Festa. I do think Festa's good. I think the strikeout upside is real. On the other side of this thing, Shota Imanaga for 95.94. Very effectively priced as well. Not as effectively priced on DK compared to those other guys, but it's more effective. They're way too low priced than his price is off. 24.8% strikeout rate, a 3.09 ERA against a 3.76 xFIP, just a microscopic 3.6% walk rate on the season, inducing a 14.3% swinging strike rate, 3.37% home runs on medium contact, 39.2% hard hits, 88.7 miles an hour of exit velo, solid handful of barrels at 8.9%, and he is a fly ball trajectory pitcher, so you can lose the occasional one. He's not completely safe from guys like Royce Lewis, but you can see not too many of these guys above even halfway to the magic number. Last time out, Imanaga struck out 7 but gave up 4 earned runs to St. Louis on 10 hits. Not a meltdown, but not a great DFS day. No win, no quality start. 5 2/3, so no quality start against Kansas City. The start before that, gave up 3 earned on 6 hits, struck out just 3. That's another pretty rough one, considering the prices that they want for him. But I could give you a start before that against the Diamondbacks, who were good against lefties, where he went 7 innings, gave up just 1 earned run on 2 hits, struck out 10. The 1 earned run came on a solo homer. Really has only had 2 rough games all year. A total meltdown against the Mets on June 21st. He gave up 10 runs on 11 hits in 3 innings. And then a 7-run game before that on May 29th against the Brewers. 7 runs on 8 hits, struck out just 1 over 4 1/3. Every other start outside of the 4-run game in his most recent 1 over 6 2/3, every other start, he gave up 3 runs or fewer. Most of them were quality starts. A couple he came up short on innings. Solid like 7-8 strikeouts in most of those games. Just a very, very, very effective pitcher. Lopez, exactly 7 strikeouts in each of his last 3. No more than 2 earned runs in any of those 3. Went 6, gave up 2 to the Mets, struck out 7. 7 innings against the Tigers and the Brewers. Not like combined, across 2 separate starts. 1 at Detroit, 1 at home against the Brewers. Again, 7 strikeouts in each of those. 2 earned runs on 6 hits to the Tigers, 1 earned run on 4 hits to the Brewers. Lopez has a few more blow-ups on the year. 6 earned runs to Texas back in May, 7 earned runs to the Yanks back in early June, 5 earned runs. It's not a total disaster, but it's not good for DFS. That came against the Rays, and 6 earned runs to the Astros at the beginning of July. Overall, though, we're dealing with mostly clean games and very strong game log. I love the upside for Pablo. I like the upside a lot for Imanaga. He's in the worst matchup. The Twins are better than the Cubs. But like I said about the Cubs yesterday, the one thing that they do pretty well is sequencing and getting on base. So Lopez, if he loses a couple guys, maybe not entirely safe. But that's where the extra factor of the wind blowing in at 20 miles an hour really, really helps. Because that home run downside kind of evaporates around the edges. If you're considering bats in this game, seems like a stretch to me. The Twins have been very good this season, but I saw Manny Margot and my brain went to the Rays as I was saying it. Manny Margot is not a good leadoff hitter. He's only up there because there's a lefty on the mound. He is effective enough against lefties, but not a great DFS contributor against anybody, really. Every now and then he'll have a game with 3,100, 2,500. He's just cheap to bolt on, and everything in this game is working against offensive upside. Carlos Santana, 3,800, 2,800, 14 home runs, a 179 ISO, 113 WRC plus. Very good run creator, decent amount of power, very low strikeout at 17.3% for the power upside. Good correlated scoring option with Royce Lewis and Jose Miranda, Willie Castro even further down the lineup, but limited opportunities for these guys. Royce Lewis, that 14.96 might honestly be a little bit deceptive hitting that ball into the wind. The wind, it comes through the Vegas line, but it doesn't necessarily get injected directly into the home run model for a guy like that. He's just undeniable for power. 13 homers and 139 chances, a 388 ISO. He's been absolutely absurd when he's been on the field this year. But not one of the better spots to roster Royce Lewis. Jose Miranda, very good line drive hitter, slashing 324, 366, 513. He's hit 9 home runs, a 189 ISO, 146 WRC plus. Very strong season for a guy who only costs 4,300, 3,000 at third base or first base. Second base and shortstop for Willie Castro, 4 positions on the FanDuel slate. Playable mix and match caliber option, getting on at a 350 clip, giving you more of a correlated scoring kind of a season than individual output. But he's a very playable option. 23.9% strikeout, could be a little bit better. He's been more diminished lately, but it could come roaring back to life given the on base and what he's looking to do most games. Austin Martin at 25-24, mix and match caliber outfield second base. Prefer him at second base probably than just another outfielder. Supposed to be a little bit better than what he's done over these 164 plate appearances, but again, bad situation. Max Kepler, in a bad situation, also lefty here. Don't love the option from the 7 spot. Player I like a lot, but in this situation, not a great option. 105 WRC plus, 7 home runs on the season in a down year for Max. Christian Vasquez is just here to catch. Brooks Lee, 3,500, 2,700. He's been okay over his 103 plate appearances, but 20 points below average for run creation. 2 home runs, 2 steals, but very limited premium contact with 22.8% hard hits, 5.1% barrels. Seems pretty skippable in these pitching conditions. On the Cubs side, Ian Happ at the top of the lineup, on-base machine with a 336 on base, also a 118 WRC plus, 17 homers. 15 homers from Michael Busch. If he's in the lineup, 343 on base. The lefty's had a great season. Lost his second base eligibility on FanDuel, just a first baseman across both sites now, but still a very effective option for just 3,900, 2,900. He is very, very cheap for the quality that he's provided all year long. Very high strikeout at 31.5%. In this game, more of a target for Pablo Lopez strikeout upside, but a very good option for power. Seiya Suzuki, 4,900, 3,500, another really effective bat. Right-handed hitter with a 12.2% barrel rate, 50% hard hits, 16 home runs, 10 steals, 221 ISO, gets on at a 347 clip. Just the definition of what this team does. Cody Bellinger from the left side, 5,600 on DraftKings. A little bit expensive. Again, I'm going to rant about it again. Compared to where everybody else has been on DraftKings. I still don't exactly know how they're arriving at that 5,600 for Cody Bellinger. I know they can't like price against the wind today or anything like that, but just facing Pablo Lopez, like that's a weird price. Royce Lewis on the other side is only 54. It's just strange. 35 on FanDuel, or excuse me, 32 on FanDuel for Cody Bellinger is more correct for the season he's having. He is a good player. He's got 11 home runs, a very respectable slash line, 110 WRC+, but he's not really excelling at anything. Isaac Paredes, 46, 3,000, 16 home runs, over 458 plate appearances, just a 182 ISO. I continue to be curious about what his output's going to be with the Cubs. What does his game log look like since arriving? Seven games with the Cubs so far. 111, 172, 185. He's created runs 98% worse than average. No home runs. Dynamite acquisition, Chicago. As I said when he got there, and it's courtesy of a note that I read somewhere where I said, oh, let me look at that. Paredes did have like one specific spot he hit a lot of his home runs to in Tampa Bay. So with that help gone, maybe it gets ugly because there was a stretch through there where it's like, yeah, he hit 31 home runs last year, but it came on pretty limited contact. I do think he's good, but maybe we're dealing with just more this kind of a guy than the guy we had last year. Maybe we're dealing with a little bit more limited output. Still low strikeout, can draw a walk, can get involved, but shakier than he might have otherwise been. Nico, 41-29, mix and match caliber option, 324 on bases, up to 19 stolen bases, running a little bit more lately, but not a super high quality DFS play. 36-27 for Dansby Swanson is just very cheap, but he's slashing 224, 296, 348, and he's been 17 points worse than average creating runs this year. He's cheap for a reason. You just got to cling to that hard-hitting barrel rate upside and hope for the best. Crow Armstrong and Bethancourt are kind of nose down at the bottom of the lineup. Every now and again, you can get a home run out of Bethancourt. He's got 3 on the season, over 100 plate appearances, but he's pretty limited. Dead mid price on DraftKings for a catcher. Bottom of the Cubs lineup into a 20-mile-an-hour wind against Pablo Lopez. I'm going to say he's not on the board. Pablo Imanaga, no bats. Red Sox and the Royals. Hey, we've actually got both these lineups. Play our fun daily game of who's leading off for the Royals. It's Mike Massey. So, Bayo, moderately playable part, mostly on DraftKings. I don't think the FanDuel price is overly justifiable against a pretty good Royals team on a day where they are pulling a 4.48 implied total against. Bayo, 21.9% strikeouts, but probably a little bit better than that overall, given an 11.9% swinging strike rate, not a terrible CSW. I think there's a little bit more juice for Ks for Bayo on the right day. But the Royals are very low strikeout themselves, 17.4% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of the lineup. The thing that I think is a little bit deceptive about Bayo and his quality, and the reason that I do think it's 65 on DraftKings, he's a little bit playable, is, yes, he's got a 5.13 ERA. That 3.73 xFIP is a whole lot better, though. That's a significant chunk below that 5.13 ERA. It's not, like, on its own a spectacular number, but it's not totally bad either. It's indicative that he's much better than this. This is a results number. This is a who you are number. He's given up some premium contact, but it comes on a very low trajectory, 6.3 degree average launch. He's another guy that's not overly easy to hit home runs against. Probably a little bit of bad luck baked into that 3.62% home run rate, given the 6.3 degree average launch. You can see that Stuff Plus actually likes him a little bit, 2.75 above average by Stuff Plus, as compared to the guy on the other side who's having the allegedly much better season. Let's look at what's actually real. Stuff Plus you can take or leave. 97.31 puts Lugo a few points below average, where Bayo's above average. ERA, again, results-based rather than who you are based. A lot of ERA has nothing to do with the pitcher. Lugo's got a good 2.57 ERA, but Bayo's actually got the better xFIP, 3.73 versus 3.80. If you want to use Sierra as a tiebreak, 3.96 for Bayo. One of these days I'll just put Sierra into the sheet. I don't refer to it enough. Ooh, that's close. Lugo just edges him out. It's 3.96 for Bayo, and it's 3.93 for Lugo. Sierra is a very good indicator of long-term ERA. So I don't think these guys are all that dissimilar. 21.3% strikeouts for Lugo, 5.5% walks. He's been better at keeping guys off base for sure. 102 whip versus a 144. That's where your difference in ERA is probably coming from. He gives up a little bit more fly ball trajectory at 10.2 degrees, but still very, very manageable, and he's given up fewer home runs, 2.01% home run rate. But the contact is not all that dissimilar. It's a bad matchup for both of these guys. Lugo costs a full $9,200 on DraftKings, $9,900 on FanDuel. Not projected all that far off from where Bayo is at. Are the Royals necessarily that much better than the Red Sox that you wouldn't want to just take Bayo shares? Like if you had to, if something happened and somebody came down and the UFO landed, came down, I said, hey, look, we're going to blow up the planet unless you succeed with either Seth Lugo or Brian Bayo tonight. Are you that much more comfortable in Seth Lugo's ability to succeed against the Red Sox? I'm not. Would it be the choice? I don't even know. I think I might take my shot against the Royals. Hope for the best. Sorry, Earth. I think we're looking more at bats in this one. I like the looks of the Red Sox with all those heavy lefties up at the top. Jarren Duran just having an absurdly good season. I bookmarked it. Let me see if I can find it quick enough. How many games do we have left? 4 games after this one. It's 5:23. We can do this. We'll make good time through those other games. We're fine. Let me see if I can find it real quick. There was a really good Jarren Duran stat. Somebody tweeted it out. It was something like a handful of players in Major League history had more than X amount of home runs, doubles, triples, runs, RBIs, like every single category that matters in terms of counting stats back in the baseball card type stuff. And it was a very small, call it 10, and it was probably lower than 10. Maybe it was on the other handle. Players in Major League history had reached that for a full season, and he's done it in early August. Here it is. Per Boston Sports Info, at Boston Sports Inf, there are only 8 players since 1900 in an entire season with more than 35 doubles, more than 13 triples, 14 home runs, 27 steals, and an 860 OPS. Jarren Duran has done it in 111 team games, which nobody has ever done. 2 of those players are Ryan Sandberg in 1984 and Jimmy Rollins in 2007, who they go on to point out both won the MVP. The other ones on that list are a little bit less noteworthy. 1963, Veda Pinson. 1925, Kiki Cuyler? C-U-Y-L-E-R, Cuyler. Never said that name before. 1920, George Sisler, I've actually heard of. Duke Kenworthy in 1914. And Napla Joy, I've actually heard of as well, back in 1901. So, obviously, this is a very, very unique, exceptional season that we've gotten out of Jarren Duran. Killer player. 294, 353, 513, a 218 ISO, 135 WRC plus, 14 homers, 27 steals. Willie Abreu from the 2 spot, 4,300, 3,100 against what is in my mind still a gettable enough righty. I like the spot again. 12 home runs, a 241 ISO over his 297 chances, 12.9% barrels and 50% hard hits from the left side. Guys, this is star caliber premium contact numbers over what is almost 300 plate appearances now. It's not the complete sample. It's not a full season, but this is a more extended sample now, and he has maintained a ton of quality. Creating runs 31% better than average, getting on at a very good 340 clip. Willie Abreu is good. 4,300 is way too cheap. 3,100 is effectively cheap. Yoshida, 4,000, 2,800, slashing 277, 352, 392, and hitting ahead of Rafael Devers. What more do you need? He's just cheap. Gets on base, correlated scoring with a little bit of upside individually, lefty power, lefty ability to drive the ball effectively. Last year, 40.6% hard hits on a very low strikeout rate, so a lot of frequent quality, or 14% strikeout rate last year. A lot of frequent and very high quality contact. No Tyler O'Neill again. He's been sick for like 4 straight days now. It's kind of annoying because I left him in my lineup in the Dynasty League. But you do get Devers, 5,800, 4,000, slashing 306, 384, 604 with a 298 ISO and 25 home runs. Absolute superstar. Very few people hit the ball much harder than Rafi Devers does. Connor Wong, 3,700, 3,000 remains very, very, very affordable where you have to play catchers and is the effective first baseman on this team where you don't have to play catchers. 10 home runs on the season, a dynamite slash line, creating runs 23% better than average. Just a good player. Dom Smith, $3,200 mix and match first baseman on DraftKings, $2,600 on FanDuel, 6 home runs, limited output, but another lefty bat in this lineup. Does have a quality 9.5% barrels. I don't want to sell him completely short. 9.4% walks is also pretty effective, but mix and match quality. Nick Sogard in at shortstop today, $2,200 across sites. Is there any reason to play Nick Sogard? 12 home runs and 10 steals in 406 AAA chances as a 26-year-old this year. 279, 382, 439. I guess if you're building out a lot of Red Sox stacks and you want to occupy your shortstop play with a, I don't know, medium talent, then you could do worse. But probably not getting much out of Nick Sogard. David Hamilton gives you some ability in the stolen base and correlated scoring department, but he's only got a 92 WRC plus and a 307 on base. Has swiped 28 bags and 257 opportunities with that limited on base. Sedan Rafaela has been very good for back of the baseball card stats. 56 runs, 57 ribbies, 13 homers, 16 steals. Limited in terms of on base and actual correlated scoring potential, but effective enough for DFS. Pretty cheap for the output. Michael Massey at the top for the Royals, second base option with a little bit of lefty power, 9 home runs in 204 chances, a 215 ISO, 101 WRC plus. Just not a good fit in the leadoff spot with a 282 on base. Continues to limit what this team can do as far as sequencing and correlated scoring at the start of the game. Bobby Witt, 66-46. Dynamite option, one of your top shortstops. If you're not your top shortstop, potential MVP candidate, 343, 389, 587, a 244 ISO, 165 WRC plus, 20 home runs, 25 steals, 15.4% strikeouts, 14% barrels, 49.1% hard hits. Nothing not to like. 777 in the home run model. Even that, talk about appealing. Jackpot of a home run play. Vinny Pasquantino. Coming off just having a monster week plus. I think he had, 3 home runs and a stolen base last week? Just to rub it in my face that after acquiring him, I didn't put him in the lineup. Popped him in there this week. He had a home run for me yesterday. He's up to 16 on this season. We're at 265, 321, 452, 187 ISO, 109 WRC plus, 16 homers on all his frequent and excellent contact that he makes at an absurd rate. Good news, gang. Vinny is still not quite at his top price, and he's still not quite at his top output. There's still time to jump on the Vinny Pasquantino bandwagon that we've been banging the drum for all season. Sal Pettis, 53, 31, 20 home runs, 191 ISO. You just got to work around, the combination of him and Vinny. If you're going first base util, it limits your ability to put 2 quality shortstops into a lineup. Not that you have to do that by any means, but it is one angle into a slate. So you do get the multiple guys that you want at first base and util on FanDuel. That's less of an issue on the DraftKings slate, where you're going obviously catcher and first base. MJ Melendez, another guy who just hits the ball very, very hard. 9.1% barrels, 42.8% hard hits this year. Both of those are down from last year and the year before, where he was making just utterly elite contact. He's not a good hitter in terms of frequent contact. You can see 195, 255 on the front end of the slash line. He does have a 202 ISO for the season. He has hit 13 home runs in just 310 chances. Just very limited. High strikeout at 25.5%, 76 WRC plus. But he's probably my next man in after the top end. Maybe it's Hunter Renfroe at 3,800, 2,800, who's been more effective lately. He's up to 11 home runs, a 171 ISO, 103 WRC plus, a more frequent contributor in terms of actually being able to create runs and get on base a little bit better than MJ does. Arguable about who has more power at this point. Hunter Renfroe did hit 80 home runs over the last 3 seasons, 11 this year in more opportunities than MJ, and not making as elite contact as MJ is. Adam Frazier, mix and match part, over 218 plate appearances. Some Mendoza, it's up 300 on base, a 58 WRC plus. Michael Garcia, a playable part, second base, third base on both sides, 47, 28, effectively cheaper on the FanDuel slate, 6 home runs, 27 steals. You can play Michael Garcia from the bottom of the lineup. He should be better than he's been. Like, the output doesn't really match the talent, doesn't even necessarily match like the hard hit rate and combined with a low strikeout rate. So there is upside here. There is appeal. He's just had a rough year. Kyle Isbell, mix and match player at the bottom of the lineup. Just another outfielder. What does Vegas say? I'll ride with Vegas. Royals bats, Red Sox bats, then Seth Lugo. And then Brian Bayo. I do think all 4 corners are playable in the right spots. Like Bayo, 65 on DraftKings. Seth Lugo as a pay-up, not really comfortable with it on FanDuel. In the mix maybe on DraftKings, but he's probably your least appealing of the $9,000 pitchers on DraftKings. Right there. I'd rather have Imanaga for sure. I'd rather have Sonny Gray for sure. And then everybody else is below 9,000. So just like, why are you drawing shares of Seth Lugo, who I think we've established is pitching above his head a little bit, against the Red Sox? Just doesn't feel great. Not priced effectively enough on a day where they lowered everybody else's prices. So just find your spots for those. I prefer the hitting in this game. Coors Field, we don't need to talk about either one of these pitchers in terms of actually playing them. Let's see if we got the lineups. We do. A couple of sneaky bats down toward the bottom of the Mets lineup as usual. Going to be interesting. Definitely more reason to consider the Harrison Baders and Tyrone Taylors of the world on a slate like this, where everybody's going to be flocking to the Mets. Even those guys are going to get popular. But it's Kyle Freeland on the mound, who is not a terrible pitcher overall. We obviously got away with one the other day on the road, but we're not going there today with the Mets drawing a 6+ total. 18.5% strikeouts, a very good 5.8% walk rate, but a bad 5.64 ERA, a good 4.19 xFIP underneath that reveals the quality of the pitcher. But he's limited for swinging strikes. CSW gives up a fair amount of power and premium contact on a fly ball trajectory. Just feeds the home run upside. 3 of the Mets above the magic number and 2 of them in the effective 8s. So love the Mets. Obviously, everybody's going there. They're not all that high priced. Somebody pointed out earlier in the show, FanDuel did a better job of taxing Coors Field than it looks like DraftKings did today. But easy enough to reach. And on DraftKings, you've got all those cheap pitchers to work with, so I don't think it matters. Severino, 18.5% strikeouts, 3.93 ERA, 4.43 xFIP. It's been good by Stuff Plus, has been fairly good at limiting premium contact and power this season. 4.43 xFIP is not ideal, obviously. It's higher than Kyle Freeland's on the other side with a matching strikeout rate and a worse walk rate. So if we're not going to Freeland, I don't really see the need to go to Severino outside of the idea that maybe he finds a few bonus strikeouts against the Rockies. Odds are he gets hit a little bit here. So I'm just leaning bats. For the Mets, Frankie Lindor off the top. Easily one of the top shortstop plays on the slate. 22 home runs, 23 stolen bases, a 205 ISO, 126 WRC plus, 59.45. I'm perfectly happy paying those prices for Francisco Lindor in Coors Field. If that happens to render him not under owned, he's going to be popular, but somehow maybe lower owned than he should be because he's the most expensive bat on this team, and people for whatever reason don't like Francisco Lindor. That's just to our benefit. Kill that, open this, and put the players on the board and take the pictures out. This is honestly pretty manageable numbers. I'm surprised. There's not a Met projected for even 20 points of ownership on DraftKings. That's surprising. Lindor is the most popular Met. But, I mean, we're talking mid-teens. And then everybody else, 12 points or lower. Pete Alonso in single digits. I think they might be off on this one. I think the Mets are going to be more popular than this. I would love it if they're not. Nimmo for 5,000, a very good lefty bat. 233, 349, 410. Good at getting on base. Has 16 home runs and 11 stolen bases. Not really worried any lefty against a guy like Freeman, but let me give it a quick look. Yeah, he's good lefty. 282, 363, 482 with a 200 ISO. That's right. He's basically reverse splits this year. So no issues with Nimmo for affordable price on DraftKings at 5,390 is high price. The FanDuel did do a good job taxing this. Those top 4 hitters are very difficult to get together. That's an average of 4,000. On DraftKings, 53 average, and then if you get Vientos in there, who's going to be very popular, 51. And then if you get, 4 of those guys and 1 guy down here, it obviously comes way down. JD Martinez at Coors Field, dynamite option, 14.9% barrels, 44.2% hard hits, 12 home runs, a 182 ISO. We're a little bit diminished, but that's to be expected at this point in JD Martinez's career. He's been one of the better right-handed power bats in baseball over the last 8 seasons. Alonso, 54-39, 23 home runs on the year, a 222 ISO. Pretty significant power bat from the right side there. 11.7% barrels is way down from 14.7 last year, but the hard hits are actually up a little bit. Striking out around the same rate, drawing around the same rate of walks. 11.14 in the home run model today. Mark Vientos cost just $4,500 somehow at Coors Field. If they were playing in Queens tonight, I'd be saying that's too cheap. Over 259 chances, Vientos is now slashing 283, 36, 547 with a 267 ISO, and he's created runs 48% better than average. He has a 16.6% barrel rate and 44.4% hard hit rate, and he's blasted 16 home runs in 259 chances. Can we make this guy more than 4,500 at Coors Field? Again, I would be saying this if he were playing in Queens tonight. That's an absurd price. He deserves to be the most popular Met, and he's not. Jose Iglesias, mix and match quality player who's been very, very good, over 133 plate appearances for this team, slashing 331, 376, 500 with a 150 WRC plus. Yeah, you can absolutely click him into lineups for a cheap price. He plays 3 positions on FanDuel. I don't think any of it's real, but he's at Coors Field. Luis Serenz, 35-31. Definitely not Francisco Alvarez. More of a catcher than a hitter, but 10.5% barrels and 50.9% hard hits is odd output for him for premium contact. 3 home runs and 80 plate appearances, 205 ISO. Maybe he learned how to hit for power somewhere in there. I doubt it. Playable part at the cheap pricing at Coors Field, though, especially on DraftKings where you need catchers. You could do worse. Harrison Bader and Tyrone Taylor were the 2 interesting players that I referred to before at the bottom of the lineup. Neither one is all that frequent of a contributor, and Bader's been the more frequent. He's got a 105 WRC+, so he's above average. 8 home runs, 15 steals, 271, 311, 411 on the slash line. Overall, a mix and match quality talent. Just another outfielder type, but gains way more ground than that based on being 3,400, 3,100 across sites playing at Coors Field today. There's more than enough talent against Kyle Freeland from the right side of the plate for him. And then same thing for Tyrone Taylor. Taylor's got a 9.1% barrel rate from the right side. He's hit 6 home runs in 246 chances. He's got a 162 ISO. He's a sneaky righty power bat from time to time. He's not an extreme power hitter, but he's got some power. He's got DFS caliber power, right? So 1 through 9 for the Mets, at least interesting. Top 5 is obviously where you want to get the most plays from, but it's quality down through that lineup. So and it becomes affordable, and obviously you offset a lot of ownership going further down the lineup. Offsetting ownership a little bit more even, but they will be more popular than I was expecting, at least per DK or per RG's DK projections. The Rockies, I think they're playable against Sevy here. They get the Coors Field bump as well, and look where they're priced by comparison. Nobody above 5,000 on the DraftKings slate. That's a mistake. FanDuel got it more correct. again, 34s, 37s. Everybody's tough to reach in Coors Field on FanDuel today. Charlie Blackmon at the top of the lineup for just 44 on DraftKings, 34 on FanDuel. It's fairly high price. 255, 331, 405. Correlated scoring play who's putting up just a 92 WRC plus with 7 homers and 5 steals this year. It's a mix and match guy who probably won't be the most popular Rocky against Sevy. Lefty bat. You can mix him into stacks, but he's not your top priority Rocky's bat. Tovar, Brenton Doyle are probably your 2 top priority bats. Tovar having a good year at shortstop, 283, 04, 474, 99 WRC plus, 193 ISO, 18 home runs. And then Brenton Doyle has 19 homers, 21 steals, a 205 ISO, and a 106 WRC plus. He's been excellent for this team. Both those guys are high strikeouts. So is Ryan McMahon. Brendan Rodgers is a medium strikeout option, and then you get to the bottom of the lineup with a ton of strikeouts in it. So like I said, Sevy could have a sneaky upside day for Ks, but I don't think we're getting that. He hasn't been good for Ks most of the year. He has got a good swinging strike rate. He's got a terrible CSW. So comfy enough going to Rockies. Ryan McMahon for 34-35 has definitely cooled off, but 254, 343, 429 is just a typical Ryan McMahon season now. He had a tremendous start to the year, but he's been stuck on his output, 16 home runs. He's been around that level over a bit of a long period at this point, but still makes very good contact. Lefty bat, capable option at third base, and very, very affordable on DraftKings. Brendan Rodgers at 34 at second base on both sites. That's obviously way cheaper on DraftKings. 84 WRC plus, 8 home runs, an okay slash line, making good contact. Just needs to be a more frequent contributor and get some of the ISO and the WRC plus in order. Chris Bryant's been pretty bad, over 134 chances, needs to get out of Colorado somehow. Michael Talia, love the option for a home run, 11.81 in the model. He's got 19 on the season and just 256 chances. 283 ISO has become immediately one of the better home run or bust options on basically any slate that he's on. Elias Diaz is a playable catcher for 3,200 on DraftKings, less so on FanDuel. And Jake Cave is a mix and match outfielder from the bottom of the lineup. Mets bats, Rockies bats. They're shockingly affordable and popular on DraftKings, less so on FanDuel. White Sox, we got the lineup in. A's, we don't. All right. Uncomfortable conversation time. What kind of upside does Ross Stripling have against the White Sox? Like I said up top, I don't think this is Festa, Fulmer. It's not even Kyle Freeland. It's not that kind of play just because he's really, really limited for strikeout upside. 12.8% Ks this year, a 7.6% swinging strike rate, 24.5% CSW. He doesn't really lose anybody to walks, just a 5% walk rate. He's got a 5.64 ERA and a 4.72 xFIP, a 1.52 whip. Doesn't give up a lot of premium contact or power. He's very good at inducing weak and medium contact, limiting home runs. Even on a fly ball trajectory, that's an attribute. But Stuff Plus doesn't love the arsenal. If we look back over time, last year he was better for strikeouts at 18.4%. You obviously need some of that to come shining through, but he was way worse in terms of the premium contact, the home runs, the power. So if he chases the strikeouts, maybe he loses some in terms of the power output. Year before, as a tiebreaker, premium contact was up a little bit, but he managed to keep the home runs down, probably a little bit of happenstance with the 9.2% barrels in there, 20.7% strikeouts, and a spectacularly low walk rate. He was actually a good pitcher this year. If this guy happened to show up tonight, that'd be a good value option. Even if this guy showed up, you'd have a shot at it because the White Sox, outside of Luis Robert and a little bit of output from like Andrew Vaughn, there's really not that much to worry about in this lineup. Do I think Ross Stripling is a good play today? Not necessarily. Do I think Ross Stripling is playable at 5,900 on DraftKings? Absolutely. Cheap SP2 bargain bin dart. And this is one of those ones that's just been on the bottom of the bargain bin. There's a piece of gum stuck to it. It's all dusty and everything. And you got to to see what the name of the DVD is even. Because we're all shopping in DVD bargain bins, obviously. But it's there. At 6,800, just compared to where everything else on this slate is priced, I struggle to say it's really there on FanDuel. 5 2/3 in each of the last 2 starts. He's only completed the 6 3 times this year. Dicey. It's a bigger dice roll on FanDuel for your 68 than it is for 59 on DraftKings. He doesn't need to do much beyond his typical start for that price. He does for this price. The White Sox are one of the best targets, if not the best target to have an atypical start against. So that feeds the upside. They got a 24.8% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of the lineup. It's a good target. Bad pitcher, good target. Bad pitcher this year with a okay track record from the last 2 years against a good target. Gives him sounds a little bit better anyway. Jonathan Cannon's just a hard no against the Athletics. They're drawing one of the highest overall totals. Not a good team overall, but there's a couple of interesting bats like Brent Rooker in the lineup with all his power. JJ Bleday, Miguel Andujar, Lawrence Butler off the top. Seth Brown back in the lineup. So it's not a completely terrible version of the Athletics, and Cannon is a gettable pitcher. Starting to just mash all my words together here at the end of the show. 4.11 ERA, a 4.51 xFIP, 15.8% strikeouts. There's really no appeal there. Not terrible in terms of the premium contact he's allowed. 3.09% home run rate. All this is manageable, but kind of preferring the A's bats. If the A's get popular, I don't really need to rush off and roster them, though. There's a lot of spots. Looks like they're drawing like medium popularity. I think they're easily playable, but they're also easy to work around. There's a lot of appeal in other spots today. But you've got a good number of home run hitters in that lineup now, and they're facing a very gettable pitcher. From the top of the White Sox lineup, Miguel Vargas, no thank you. He's just leading off. He's got a 283 on base, terrible season, over 106 plate appearances, and really nothing to point at to say like, oh yeah, he's good. Brooks Baldwin, 25-24, one of their more highly regarded prospects, but I don't know what that really buys you. He's cheap, fits into the middle infield against a gettable pitcher. If you're going to the White Sox, he's probably in your lineup for those prices in that spot in the batting order. Hasn't given us much in 58 chances in the major leagues, but obviously needs time to find his footing. Luis Robert at 4,400, 3,200. If you want to use him as a one-off, I'm totally fine with that in lineups where you're not using Ross Stripling. 13.66, totally believable in the home run model. He's got 12 long balls, 15 stolen bases, 214 ISO. Everything else about the year, over 245 chances this year, has been kind of off. 36.3%. Strikeouts is way up. He's had a pretty bad year outside of the counting stats, but he's easily their best player, and as a one-off option, he's not bad. He's integral to any stack of White Sox. 32-28 for Andrew Vaughn, 13 homers on the year, but just a 157 ISO and 90 WRC+, and it gets worse from there. Andrew Benintendi's awful, Lennon Sosa's bad, Gavin Sheets is terrible. Corey Lee is mix and match quality catcher with 9 home runs and 5 steals, and not even that good. And Nicky Lopez, just a back control guy who's not controlling his bat all that effectively this season. Every single hitter in the White Sox lineup is at least 8 points worse than average creating runs this year. It's a terrible baseball team, guys. On the A's side of things, I thought I said I had their lineup. I do. Did I paste the A's lineup into the wrong spot? I probably did. Maybe I just didn't grab it. Larry off the top for 41. Love it. 33,000 on FanDuel. Absolutely happy to have it. Over 262 plate appearances. He's hit 13 home runs. He's got a 231 ISO, 125 WRC+. Not the most consistent guy in the world. 248, 313 on the front end of the slash line. 27.5% strikeout rate this year, but hits the ball very, very hard. 12% barrels, 49.7% hard hits this year. Had a 9% barrel rate in his outing last year. Miguel Andujar, over 255 plate appearances. He's been effective, a 108 WRC+. Just not hitting the ball hard like he used to. But they might have just said, hey, Miguel, just go out there and put bat on ball. Get the first base, man. 295, 322, 402. It's been effective enough for correlated scoring and run creation. JJ Bleday, 37-26, 13 home runs from the left side with 198 ISO, 118 WRC+. Effectively low strikeout at 18.3, 10.3% walks. Not a bad option. Brent Rooker has gotten a lot better this season, as I pointed out. Lot fewer whiffs on all variety of pitches. Over 410 plate appearances, striking out still 30% of the time, but that's improved by nearly 3 percentage points. 10.5% walks, getting on base at a 366 clip. 167 WRC+ is partly fed by that. 288, 366, 587. Power's always been very real. 19.1% barrels, 52.3% hard hits, 28 home runs, and a 299 ISO. 10.36, the only guy above average or above the magic number in the home run model, but not far behind for Shea Langoliers. I would believably say that Lawrence Butler's got a little bit better than that kind of a chance. The model's just not fully caught up on Butler yet. But there's definite power output upside for the A's. Langoliers is just a power bat. 21 home runs at 236 ISO. Dead at league average for run creation. Just a 271 on base. A lot of strikeouts. Not that many walks. But absolutely brutalizes the ball when he connects with it. Seth Brown for 26-25 is interesting. Lefty bat. 9.6% barrels down in a limited sample over the last 2 seasons. But look where the power was the last 2 years. That's a lot of premium contact from a very affordable first baseman. Outfielder on FanDuel for 25, definitely playable over there as well. 10 home runs, just a 161 ISO in a half a season. But a lot of any given slate upside from Seth Brown, especially for that price. Toro for 28-25, mix and match caliber. 6 home runs, 4 steals, 92 WRC+. Zach Geloff, 13 homers and 14 steals, but way below average, and way below average on base percentage as well. 2,400 apiece for Max Schumann is effective. 6 home runs, 11 steals, 251, 335, 351. Creating runs 3% above average. Your quality's really there, but any one of these 3 guys in a lineup to offset price and popularity a little bit, or just grab a position, any one of those 3 guys is easily playable. In a weird way, the A's lineup runs 9 men deep today. This is not a bad version of the A's. A lot of home runs through the game log. A lot of quality run creators now. Not great at getting on base. That's a 306 average on base percentage. But the average WRC plus is up to 108, including a 75, a 92, and an 88 in there. So again, 1 through 5 is your real quality. Seth Brown is a little bit offset, I think, even from these guys. He fits more into the top group despite where the numbers are, just on talent. And then these guys are all playable pieces. A's bats, kind of on their own from this game. Raw Stripling value, if you want it, it's there. It's not good. It's not reliable. It's probably going to fail. Even on a good day, you're probably just looking at around these medians. So bear that in mind. He's just cheap. White Sox, big no, and Cannon, pretty big no. If you wanted to argue that you could grab some cheap stuff out of the White Sox and throw it at Raw Stripling, I wouldn't tell you that you were completely wrong because they are cheap. But they're not good and they're not likely to succeed. There's a reason they've lost 21 games in a row. 553, rounding the turn into the home stretch. Luis Castillo for 8,200 is an absolute bargain. He's going to be stupid popular on the DraftKings slate. 9,700, I'd like to find a way to get to him on FanDuel in some lineups. 3.43 ERA with a 3.88 xFIP. The xFIP being higher than the ERA is not ideal. This isn't terrible, but it's definitely higher than what we're used to seeing from Luis Castillo. Last year, 3.81. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe it's not that much higher. 3.23 2 years ago. 3.34 ERA. So he defied it a little bit last year as well. Year before, 2.99 ERA with a 3.23 xFIP. Regardless, he is a very high-end pitcher. 23.3% strikeout rate is also diminished a little bit. It was 27.3 last year, 27.2 the year before. He's lost a little bit of swinging strike, 14.7 down to 11.4 this year. CSW is down a little bit, but it's actually better than it was. This is a really weird CSW that year. Huh. That's strange. I don't recall ever really spotting that before. 11.7% swinging, 23.3% CSW that year, but still had a 27.2 strikeout rate and a 7.3% walk rate. Interesting. So just lots of strikeout upside for Luis Castillo, even in a little bit of a downturn overall for the season. He's also pitching pretty deep into games, 136 and a third over 23 starts this year. Definitely worth paying for on the FanDuel slate and not at all expensive on DraftKings. He's gone at least 6 in 5 straight starts, 6 and 2/3, 6, 7, and then 6 in 2 straight starts. Quality start in every single one of those. He gave up 4 earned runs in each of his first 3 starts of the year back in late March and early April. Then he went on a run of, I'm going to call it 10 or 11 starts, and then gave up 5 earned runs in a game, had 1 decent start, then gave up another 5, and then 4 after that. That 4-run game was June 25th. Since then, he hasn't given up more than 3. He's given up 3 times, and then either 1 or 0 through there. So, the idea that he's not as good as he used to be, I feel like is just kind of overblown from a couple spots through the season where it was like a few bad games in a row, and even those bad games weren't really bad. The earned run high on the season is 5. The actual runs on the season high is also 5. He was more limited for strikeouts in some of those games too, which didn't really help the DFS performance because you're not carving back any of those points. So it looked even worse than it actually was. So, you're obviously not gaining him against the popularity at that price. I think people know enough to just go to him at that price. This price, maybe you are, by comparison to the other top options on the board. Keter Montero, over 7 starts, 43 2/3. Has a 6.18 ERA, but a more interesting 4.40 xFIP. 18.3% strikeout rate is not good. It's not completely awful, but it's below average. 6.5% walks is not bad. 9.2% swinging, 27.7% CSW could both be better. He's lost a lot to some rough outings with home runs. 7.2% barrels, 39.1% hard hits, 90.1 miles an hour of exit velo. He's gotten a little bit unlucky. These are not good contact numbers, but even with that, 5.91 is pretty high on the home run output. 2 starts ago, he gave up 3 homers to the Twins. 5 earned runs on 8 hits, struck out 5. 2 home runs in the game before that to Toronto at Toronto, struck out 3. 5 earned runs on 8 hits in that one as well, over 5 1/3. His most recent start was against the Royals. He went 7 innings, struck out just 3, did give up a home run, 4 earned runs, but that's not a complete meltdown. You pick up a few extra strikeouts in that one. If that was a 6 strikeout game, it would look better, especially on DK where the quality start doesn't matter as much. Before the 3 straight games where he gave up 5 earned runs, he was actually coming off 2 pretty effective starts. Only 4 strikeouts in both games, but 6 1/3, 2 runs on 6 hits, including a homer to Minnesota at Minnesota. And then what's probably his best start so far, 6 1/3 against Cleveland, 3 hits, no runs, 4 strikeouts, and a walk. It's not a good spot, but the Mariners have been really targetable. 25.4% strikeout rate. I'm thinking we're just looking at 5 or 6 strikeouts on a good day. But for 5,400, I can believe it. 7,100 on FanDuel. I can believe there's a little tiny sliver of additional upside beyond what Montero's projected for in the median. He's also got a gigantic basement with a big trap door that's like covered in grass, and you step on it, and you just right through the trap door, and you're just dead on spikes at the bottom of the slate. So bear that in mind if you're considering it. It's mostly just drawing against the Mariners and their 25.4% strikeout rate for the season for this projected version of the lineup. That said, you can see what the power numbers are doing. Cal Raleigh at an 18.61, I believe, is your slate leader in the home run model. 11.89 for Randy Rosarena, not all that far behind. And then a bunch of guys in the 8s, the 9s, the 7 down here at the bottom of the lineup. Oh, we actually do have their lineup in. It's mostly those same guys. Slightly different order. So there's big time power danger for Keter Montero. There's not a ton of quality in play, but it is one of the better matchups in baseball this season. Roll the dice if you want it. This is a very low price. That's low for this slate on FanDuel. And he lands here on the board. Know what you're buying. Probably failure. Tigers bats against Luis Castillo. Not all that appealing. Maybe more appealing this year than they would have been last year or the year before, but still not all that appealing. If you're going there, Colt Keith is probably your top priority. Keith and Vierling are your 2 best performers this season. 11 home runs for Keith, 13 for Vierling. Vierling's at a 100 WRC plus. Technically, Justin Henry Malloy over his 167 chances at a 107 WRC plus, and then Bly Madras over his 38 chances at a 166 WRC plus have been better for, in the small number of innings and whatnot, have been better for run creation. We'll see how that mass out over time. Colt Keith is a good hitter. He's come into his own a little bit over the last 2 months. 252, 311, 393. He's still got some growing to do, but there is very real power there. 13 home runs and a 184 ISO out of Matt Vierling. He's making good contact this year, but that's basically doubled his barrel rate from the last 2 seasons. So either he's made a very dramatic change, or he's just found a little bit of happenstance output earlier in the season. I tend toward the latter. that it's a little bit of happenstance and he doesn't necessarily continue over, say, another 200 plate appearances. But he's been effective, so if you're going there, it's probably one of your key bats. Madras being so cheap is interesting. He's got some good premium contact and some decent numbers through the minors. We talked about him the other day as an interesting option for all that savings at $2,200 at first base on DraftKings, $2,400 on FanDuel. So I think if you're going to Tigers, it's probably, for me, Keith Veerling, Malloy, Madras, 2 through 5. And then I'm picking either Wencio Perez or maybe Parker Meadows further down. But it's not a good option against Castillo. Gio Urshela is not much of a hitter at 26-25. He's created runs at a 68 WRC plus this season with 4 home runs on the board. Meadows really struggling to find his form in the show, but supposed to have some talent. 102 pretty bad plate appearances. Does have 3 home runs and 4 stolen bases. Just a 63 WRC plus from the left side. Javi Baez retired from baseball several seasons ago and just continues to collect a paycheck from the Tigers and put on a uniform every day. And then Jake Rogers at 29-25, mix and match catcher with some power upside, but has not shown it with any kind of regularity this season. The Mariners side, I think for every share of Cater Montero that you happen to roster as a extremely cheap and probably pretty bad dart throw, you should grab probably a share and a half of Mariners bats because it probably does favor their upside. You can see a lot of power showing for these two, if nothing else. You've got Justin Turner in the middle of the lineup, still capable of getting on base at a 348 on base, 110 WRC plus. Looks like he's been a little bit more effective since joining the Mariners than what he was doing in Toronto. 7 home runs on the season. Not ideal as a cleanup hitter, but they want to get the effectiveness of Victor Robles and his 378 on base over 130 plate appearances and his 14 stolen bases in that tiny sample in the leadoff spot. And that makes sense to me. Robles is capable of maintaining maybe not 378, but a decent on base. He's got a good bat, 10.9% barrels. He's an effective striker of the baseball, fairly low strikeout, can draw a walk, can get involved, and obviously monster stolen base upside. Arena, great for counting stats, 16 home runs, 16 steals in 446 plate appearances, is off of his career paces, career trajectory. But 112 WRC plus, he's still been effective, 184 ISO, and still making very good contact. Just another guy who's down for him, but not bad numbers in a vacuum. Cal Raleigh makes elite contact, switch hitting catcher for just $4,700 on DraftKings, $3,100 on FanDuel. Highly, highly playable. Even as just a catcher one-off, that's not a bad option against a guy giving up this kind of premium contact and power. Raleigh, again, leading the home run model at 18.61. Jorge Polanco in the midst of a very bad season, 10 home runs, a 136 ISO, 86 WRC+. If I had to bet, I would say that this second base spot is where Gleyber Torres plays next year. Write that down. Luke Raley, Mitch Haniger, Dylan Moore, and Josh Rojas down the lineup. Mix and match quality plays for a little bit of power upside. 192 ISO for Dylan Moore leads that group of players. 182 for Luke Raley. 12 home runs for Raley, 11 for Haniger. Nobody overly compelling. All those guys are very high strikeout except for Josh Rojas at the bottom, and he's the worst hitter in that group. Nobody creating runs all that much outside of Dylan Moore at 108 WRC+, and that's cooled off pretty dramatically recently. Everybody else at or below league average. Luis Castillo way up top. Mariners bats. Keita Montero value darts. Really nothing from the Tigers bats for me. Last game up, 6:04. We're doing all right. We just got to punch out of this one in a bit of a hurry. So Clay Kershaw for 81-83 against the Phillies. It's probably just a hard no. 3 2/3 in his last game, wasn't effective. No strikeouts, a walk, gave up a home run, 3 earned on 6 hits, 7 actual runs over just 3 2/3. 4 innings in his first start against San Francisco, he was more effective, but he gave up 2 earned on 6 hits, struck out 6, walked 2. That's still not a good game, and there's no DFS appeal there. So even if he comes in around those medians, there's really not much ceiling. And at those prices, compared to the rest of the board, I think you do need a little bit of ceiling beyond what he's going to give you. And he's facing one of the more dangerous lineups in all of baseball. Feels like a no. Christopher Sanchez on the other side of this one, though. That's kind of interesting. Last outing, 5 2/3 against the Yankees. Didn't have a good game, 6 earned runs. Struck out 7, but gave up a homer, 6 runs on 8 hits. 6 innings against the Guardians. He gave up 3 earned on 8 hits. Struck out just 2, but that's what they do to pitchers. That is a quality start. Didn't get the win, though. They lost that game. Against the Pirates, just 2 earned runs allowed. 2 earned runs allowed in a quality start against the Dodgers before that. Struck out 5 Dodgers. Only struck out 2 Pirates. That's weird, over 5 2/3. Melted down against the Cubs on July 4th. 4 innings, 7 earned runs, 3 strikeouts, 3 walks. At that point of the season, that was like a woof, man. That's a swing and a miss for Sanchez, because he'd been really good up to that point. He'd given up 4 runs twice, but most of his starts were like 1 earned run, 0 earned runs. He was really, really good up to that point. Mix and match for strikeout output through the entire season. But he hit that 7 earned run game. That was coming off of his complete game shutout against the Marlins on June 28th. Struck out 9, gave up just 3 hits. Then came back, faced the Cubs at Wrigley, and got tattooed in that one. But overall, it's been a really good season out of Chris Sanchez. 19.6% strikeouts. He's not elite in that department. 3.36 ERA and a 3.19 xFIP, and a ridiculous 0.80% home run rate on 1.6 degrees of launch. If nothing else, Chris Sanchez really limits the Dodgers' upside. I'm surprised that we're getting even those home run marks out of those 2 guys, even those 2 hitters. That's kind of surprising. Part of that is drawn against a 4.04% home run rate that he had over 99 1/3 over 18 starts last year. So that's why it's there. But given how effective he's been and that launch angle this season, that might be unfairly drawing some previous season's numbers. He's made some significant significant strides this year. I think Sanchez is playable at 79.82, but not ideal. Alexa's going to answer our question.
By American author Stephen King.
She's telling us about the novel It.
And the 17th novel written under his own name.
That's it. Not going to mention the weird child orgy that he wrote into the beginning of that book. Probably good idea that they left out that part of the movie in both the original and the remakes. Apparently there's a prequel show coming called Welcome to Derry, which is a little bit weird if you think about the decision, because it's a story, book, movie, couple of movies that is very distinctly split between when these people were children and when these people were adults over 2 different movies in the most recent iteration. But it is a story about a demonic being that's inhabited the town of Derry for a long, long time. So I can see what they're doing. Anyway, all of that is to say that Chris Sanchez probably playable, 79.82, but doesn't necessarily fit into the slate in the top end. It's just how he fits price-wise, especially on FanDuel. At 82, with everybody else, like I trust him more than Montero, than Chris Bassett, even against the Dodgers. I think he's getting more depth than Clay Kershaw or Jeffrey Springs. Everybody else is expensive. So out of your reachable pitchers, it's not bad. Prefer him probably to Brian Bayo for 600 more. So that's just kind of how he fits in. Phillies bats real quick against Clay. Don't think we have these lineups in yet. No, we don't. Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, playable against anybody. Especially a limited version of Clay Kershaw, and then into the bullpen. 10.6 for Bryce, 11.4 in the home run model for Schwarbs. And then Trey Turner in between those two, 7.84 in the home run model. He's got 13 long balls, 13 stolen bases, and a 137 WRC+. He is absolutely fantastic at shortstop for DFS purposes. Fits right in with the Bobby Witts, the Gunnar Hendersons of the world in terms of star power. Alec Bowman, the cleanup spot, 4,900, 3,100 is very cheap for a guy slashing 295, 351, 481, a 130 WRC+, righty back going up against Kershaw. He's got a 47.1% hard hit rate on the season, strikes out just 14.3% of the time. Tons and tons of well-struck balls put into play. JT Realmuto, affordable at 46.27, especially on FanDuel. You can play Realmuto and Bryce Harper in the same lineup together. I have no issues whatsoever with that. 93 WRC+, 127 ISO out of Realmuto over 266 opportunities. Not his best season so far, but still making very good contact and just, missed a lot of time. So give him some time. I think those numbers would round into form. Nick Castellanos, 39, 28, 15 homers, a 167 ISO, 93 WRC+. Austin Hayes, a good bat to keep in mind late in the lineup if you need a cheap bat from this team. Hayes has been productive over the last handful of seasons for the Orioles, now getting a shot at very cheap prices down lineup because he was basically just boxed out of jobs in Baltimore. So it got a little rough for him to get regular plate appearances there, and his numbers have suffered for it this season. But he's still capable of like a 18 to 20 home run kind of a year across a full season. This year, 253, 308, 389. Don't sleep on him at the bottom of the lineup. 42.7% hard hits. Edmundo Sosa, 36.25. Mix and match quality option in the infield. Prefer him at second base to shortstop. Very cheap, creating runs at a 114 clip. Not a ton of DFS output, over 204 chances, but capable enough. More so, I think, than Johan Rojas, who just has 17 steals, but a 61 WRC plus, plays a great outfield. On the Dodgers side, it's the usual suspects up at the top. The top 4 spots are all elite. Shohei Ohtani, Teoscar Hernandez, Freddie Freeman, and Will Smith. That said, Chris Sanchez has been incredible at keeping the ball in the yard this year, so maybe it does take away the upside a little bit more than the model might want you to believe today. But if anybody can hit home runs against him, group is highly ranked on that list. 182 WRC plus out of Shohei, 132 WRC plus out of Teoscar, 148 for Freddie Freeman, and again, happy to have him back in the lineup, and a 113 WRC plus out of Will Smith, the superstar catcher. 5,200, 3,100 for him is pretty effective price-wise. 63.37 for Freddie is not incorrect. He's having a little bit of a down year in terms of the average, but he's still hitting 287. It's still one of the better averages in the National League. It's just usually we see him above 300. He's still getting on base at a 393 clip, creating runs at an elite level and hitting for power. Teoscar's got 24 home runs. Ohtani's got 34 and 32 stolen bases to boot. Andy Pages has been greatly diminished in the second half of the season. 368 plate appearances deep now. We're at 8 home runs. He had most of those earlier in the year. 241, 296, 372. 10 points below average for run creation. Not great. Enrique Hernandez, worst season in his career. Ahmed Rosario found his way back to the Dodgers. Over 282 plate appearances, slashing 306, 330, 417. Creating runs 14% better than average. Fills 4 positions on FanDuel for 27. 3,300 shortstop and outfield on DraftKings. That's somebody to remember is down lineup for this team now. Ahmed Rosario is not a bad baseball player. Once upon a time, he was one of the more highly regarded prospects in all of baseball. Never really became that guy, but he's having a good season. He was kind of a reclamation project for the Rays, and they flipped him for a little bit of value here. Gavin Lux having a little bit of a surge also. 6 home runs, 4 stolen bases. 118 ISO, 91 WRC plus. Needs to do a lot more work like what the last few weeks have looked like, but 3,700, 2,900, a playable lefty at the bottom of the lineup. Lefty, not ideal there, though. Nick Ahmed just here to fill in and play defense and take up a roster spot. We've talked about this pitching board a lot. Mom, it's just because it's 6:13 and I got to get through a game that's mostly pitching focused. It's not because I think the Phillies are bad. They are facing Clay Kershaw for what will be like 4 innings, and they've got a 4.27 implied total. So they were one of the less important options to talk about. And also, you can fly through some of these hitters because it's just like, those 3 are great. Play them whenever you can, right? So you don't have to go quite as deep on some of those guys. Mom is adding another 20 lineups of Phillies now. Troy, if you can get through life in the modern world without somebody listening in on your conversations, you're living out in the desert in like a trailer these days with no electrical devices of any kind. I'm just not concerned about it. The things that I say and do in here, like if they want to listen and pay somebody a government salary, I'm happy for that person to sit there with like a little, oh, he's talking about baseball again. This guy really likes baseball. Oh, Trey, I know. I know you're not serious. Like, I'm just addressing the comment. All right, so to do the pitching board real quick, it is challenging on FanDuel today. Everybody's expensive. I think given all the depth of bats that are available, you can probably get yourself to Framber, to Lugo, Imanaga, whichever one of those guys you like best. Luis Castillo up top. Bit more of a stretch to reach your Sonny Grays, your Grayson Rodriguez's of the world, but they're very, very worth it in some interesting spots. Rodriguez being the lowest owned out of all those pitchers is also kind of interesting. It's a lot more user-friendly on DraftKings. You can have basically whatever you want over there. Only 3 pitchers priced in the 9s, and some of the guys in the best matchup with some of the best talent not in the 9s. Luis Castillo at 82 and Pablo Lopez at 8,000 are going to be your 2 most popular DraftKings pitchers by far. Then Sonny Gray and Shota Imanaga join that crowd. Grayson Rodriguez will be lower owned at 8,500 by comparison over there. And then you get some interesting prices on like Framber, not bad. Bassett, if you want to take the shot against the Orioles, that's not a bad price to take shots with Chris Bassett. Use him as an SP2 in combination with some of these guys, and you're already offsetting because everybody's just going like combinations of these guys. So like I said, when I looked at the ownership, get one of these guys and then just default down to your Bassetts, your bargain bin guys, your Chris Sanchez's, your Ross Striplings, your Brian Bayos for 65. If you play a little bit in this territory, you will reap rewards in the territory of being properly leveraged against the slate. Imanaga and Pablo Lopez going to greatly benefit from the dramatic wind blowing in at Wrigley tonight. So both those guys get a little bit of a kick and a little bit of an uptick to their potential ceilings. They're going to be popular. They are expensive, but they're both very worth going to. Luis Seal's off the slate. Jeffrey Springs probably not going to give you depth, but maybe he comes in around those medians. Does have strikeout upside if he finds his form. Framber Valdez, I love the pitcher. I don't love the matchup. 96 on FanDuel, more challenging than 84 on DraftKings. Clay Kershaw, not going to give you the depth in a terrible matchup against the excellent Phillies. There you go, Mamba. Lugo, just challenged by that Red Sox lineup, and again, pitching above his head over a very good season. He's been great, just having been great this season with a lot of indicators that you're not actually pitching as well as it seems, doesn't actually buy you anything in a matchup against the Red Sox here. For my money, he's just right in the middle of the board there at an awkward price. Bassett, I don't really have a ton of faith in, but I like the prices. 8,000, he very well might end up being my FanDuel pitcher. I hate throwing him against the Orioles, but he's one of the more effectively priced pitchers, and he's one of the pitchers that's capable of giving me a complete game or 7 innings or whatever. Montero is an interesting dart throw against that very high strikeout, very bad Mariners team, but he has been bad himself, and he's got an issue with home runs. Sanchez is going to be challenged by the more complete version of the Dodgers lineup and a more interesting version when we fill out with like Ahmed Rosario and Gavin Lux down lineup. Ross Stripling against the White Sox. No faith whatsoever, but there is a little bit of a play there at 68.59. He's just cheap. He's a dart throw. Brian Bayo against the Royals. Cheap, dart throw. Playable on FanDuel at 88 if you can manage it. 65 on DraftKings I think is interesting. Molly probably not giving you much more than 80 pitches. And a bad matchup for that against Houston. Just not a lot of upside there. So I don't think we get beyond the median projections here from Molly. Sevy's a no for me at Coors Field. And Kyle Freeland at the bottom of the board is a no at Coors Field. Everybody else, and Jonathan Cannon's also a no just because he's really bad. Daniel's off the slate. Ray and Elder on either side of that Milwaukee-Atlanta game. If you want a stretch of a pitcher, either one of those guys is on the board from the mid-range. They're both effectively priced for what they are. Ray's got a little bit more strikeout upside, I think, than Elder does. Elder, a little bit more depth upside, maybe. Probably not, actually. Probably a tie there. He's just cheaper on FanDuel. More expensive on DraftKings. I oddly prefer Colin Ray to Elder, but I also do think I'm going to use the Braves and target Colin Ray. What Rockies bats? I'm going to tell you as friendly as I can, Jake, that we went through that in pretty great detail and rewind to the Rockies portion of the show at this point because I got to get checked out and get stuff updated for 11 games. Here's one last look at the home run board. One of those guys will be obvious from the Rockies here for you. It's Michael Talia. Some of the other Rockies, it's basically the usual suspects, right? It's Talia, it's Tovar, it's McMahon to some degree, and then it's Brenton Doyle. But Talia's right here at 11.81 leading the team. You get a little bit of power showing from the Mariners, obviously against those really bad power marks from Cater Montero. Luke Raley right here, 2 guys down here in the 8s. So there's a ton of power showing for Seattle. Wouldn't surprise me if they went off a little bit today. But Montero, for where he's priced by comparison to the rest of the board, can't say he's uninteresting. Bunch of guys above 10. Obviously dramatic up at the top with Ohtani, but again, this one might be a little bit deceptive considering how good Chris Sanchez has been keeping the ball in the yard all year. Ozuna and the Braves, believable against Colin Ray for their power upside. The Mets, obviously, at Coors Field. The Yanks are off the board. The Phillies showing a little bit with 2 guys above the magic number in that spot against Clay Kershaw. And then the Orioles, believably up near the top of the board as well. With that in mind, you guys, one last time, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done that. Jump into our Discord. Check out our pals over at acemind.io. All your sim and optimization needs for baseball coming into football season. Basketball not too far off in the distance. I think they might even have a product for hockey. I'm not totally sure about that because I don't really play that much hockey. A lot of ancillary sports as well. Optimizers and sim products, powerful tools for building a lot of lineups in a hurry and getting through to the nuts and bolts of what are the best possible lineups by ROI and sim results. Lowest pricing in the industry for a tool that powerful. acemind.io. Check them out. Promo code rotoscouts all in caps. 20% off your first month over there. Good luck tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll be back for more tomorrow. See you guys.